Welcome to Late Night Thrillers. Are you ready to enter the world of secret stories, unsolved mysteries, and goosebumps? Ghost stories, urban legends told in real words, realistic but strange projects and phenomena that will make you think. Suspenseful, creepy, but can't take your eyes off. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss new stories every week. Heirloom. Jeffrey walked to the basement. He stopped to look at that old tarp-covered machine that his great-grandfather built and was handed down. His father had told him about it when he was a kid. It did not look like much. It was an old piece of junk. He walked over to the deep freeze to grab some meat for dinner. Jeffrey had a simple life. He had a job at the local bank and never married. He fed Sylvester and grabbed his jacket, walked out the door, and proceeded to begin another day of exactly the same thing. He took his car keys out of his pocket to unlock the doors of his old car. The car also belonged to his father, which was handed down to him, along with his house and that old piece of junk in the basement. Jeffrey put the keys into the ignition, and the car turned, but did not start. "Crap," said Jeffrey. He tried again. Nothing. He hated this old piece of junk too. His job as a loan advisor barely paid the bills, so he couldn't afford to buy a new car. He tried once more. Nope. Guess it was time to admit defeat and take the bus. He was forced to walk through the fresh snow. Man, could things get any worse? Then a car drove by and covered Jeffrey head to toe in slush. "Crap!" yelled Jeffrey. By the time he got to the bus stop, he was freezing from all that slush covering him. He walked onto the bus, sat down, and a woman sat next to him. "Hello?" she said. "Hi," said Jeffrey. "My name is Alina. Yours?" she asked. "Jeffrey." "You look miserable. I'm also having a terrible day," said Alina. "Okay," said Jeffrey. Jeffrey was the type who didn't enjoy talking to random people. The only conversations he ever had were work-related, bill collectors or Sylvester. Who was this woman? She was intriguing, though, so he thought, why not? "Don't you want to know why?" asked Alina. "Not really my business," said Jeffrey. "I like you," Alina said. "You're funny." Okay, he was in new territory here. What were this woman's intentions? "Yeah," he said with a half a grin. "See, adorable. Want to go get coffee sometime?" asked Alina. "I guess, maybe." Alina reached into her chaos of a purse, and it made Jeffrey frustrated looking at it. Jeffrey was a very tidy and organized person. She pulled out a pen and sticky note. She wrote her number down. She bounced up out of her seat, and before she exited the bus, she slapped the sticky note on Jeffrey's forehead. Giggling, she said, "Call me," then got off the bus. Well, that was a bizarre encounter, as he took the note from his forehead. As Jeffrey walked in his front door, he put his briefcase neatly next to the shoe rack and removed his snow-ridden boots. "Meow!" screamed Sylvester. Sylvester was a beautiful tabby who spent his days at the window watching birds, hence his name. "I know, Sylvester. A moment, please," Jeffrey said. "Meow!" Now Sylvester did not care what Jeffrey had to do. His bowl was empty. Jeffrey went over to the kitchen cabinet, opened it, and pulled out a can of Sylvester's favorite tuna feast, and the sticky note fell onto the counter. He looked down at it, and it read, "Alina 555500692. Call me." Okay, he had no intention of calling her, so he threw it into the trash can. "Here, Sylvester." Jeffrey set the bowl onto the floor. "Purr." Jeffrey walked to the bedroom, changed out of his work clothes, and picked up the new novel he had been reading the last few days. He enjoyed reading adventure thrillers. He liked to experience the exciting events that his own life lacked. As he made his way to his recliner to relax and read a few chapters, Sylvester jumped up into the recliner with that pink, sticky note stuck to his foot. It was as if something kept bringing that note back to him. His mind began to spin. Should he call her? What would he say? No, yes, no. Okay, he would try. He picked up the handset to his old rotary phone and started to turn the wheel. 5, click, 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 5, click, 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 so on and so forth. It started to ring once, twice. "Hello," Alina answered. "Alina?" asked Jeffrey. "Yes, who is this?" she asked. "Mr. Silly, Jeffrey," he said. "Oh, Jeffrey. Hello. How are you?" she said. "Okay." He paused. "Want to get some coffee sometime?" he asked. "Yes. Tomorrow?" she asked. He paused again. "Okay. What's your address? I will meet you at 6 a.m., she said. 613 Toronto Drive, he said. "Great. See you tomorrow," she said. "Bye," Jeffrey said and hung up. The next morning, Jeffrey and Alina had their coffee rendezvous, and they discovered that they actually have a lot in common. They ended up dating for some time. "Will you go down to the basement and get some meat out of the deep freezer?" Jeffrey asked Alina. "Sure," she said. Now Jeffrey and Alina went on a bicycle ride last week, and due to Jeffrey's zero athletic ability, he ended up crashing into a fire hydrant, which launched him over the handlebars, resulting in a broken wrist and sprained ankle. It was hard for him to use the stairs without help. "Be careful, and don't mess with that piece of junk under the tarp," Jeffrey said. "Now, we all know what happens when you tell someone not to do something. They do exactly the opposite." Alina clicked on the dim light and started to make her way down the stairs, which were old and steep. The basement smelled of dirt and mildew and was spooky in a way. Alina gripped the railing, moving slowly down to the basement. She spotted the freezer, started to walk towards it when the silver tarp caught her eye. He told her not to mess with it, but there was no harm in just taking a peek, so she lifted the corner of the tarp. It was so shiny. This did not look like a piece of junk. She pulled back the tarp even more and started to fumble with the switches. She heard a click, and it began to glow. She fumbled around some more, trying to turn it off, but she was unsuccessful. It wasn't making any noise at all, so she decided to just cover it back up with the tarp. She grabbed some meat out of the freezer and headed back upstairs. She decided not to tell Jeffrey since he told her specifically not to touch the device. After they finished dinner, Alina decided to retire early. She was feeling so anxious. What was she going to do? Since Jeffrey was injured, she knew he would not go down there, for now. The days passed, and odd things kept happening to Jeffrey. He got into his car one morning, and again, it would not start. "I wish I had a new car," he thought. When he got to work, he received a phone call from an attorney. "Jeffrey Mitchell?" asked the person on the phone. "Yes?" "We have some bad news," the person said. "Who is this?" asked Jeffrey. "I apologize. I am Rick Henderson of Henderson and Associates. I am your Uncle Roger Mitchell's attorney. Unfortunately, he was killed in a mysterious accident. You are listed as the sole beneficiary of his estate. There is a substantial amount of money, as well as a very expensive sports car. Are you able to come down to our office next week to sign some paperwork?" Rick Henderson asked. "Sure. Let me transfer you to my assistant, Veronica, and she will provide you with all the details. Sorry for your loss." Well, all Jeffrey could think was, his father had a brother? What was this mysterious accident? A few days later, while he was sitting at home, his old heating unit started to make an annoying clanking sound. He sighed and thought, "I wish I knew someone who could fix that piece of crap." Ring, ring. "Hello? Jeffrey Mitchell?" asked the woman. "Yes." "Exciting news. We randomly select phone numbers from the phone book, and the first person to answer wins a new heat pump unit, and you won," said the woman. "Okay," said Jeffrey. "Would tomorrow be okay to have a technician come to install your brand new unit?" asked the woman. "I guess," said Jeffrey. He really needed a new heat pump. He decided to take a day off from work, so he would be here when the technician came. "Part of the prize is that we include you in our new ad. Is that okay with you?" she asked. Sure," said Jeffrey. "Great. The technician's name is Alan. He will be there sometime in the morning. Congratulations." and the woman hung up. The next morning, Alan arrived with an entire film crew. They made a huge ordeal and interviewed him. He was not happy one bit. "I wish they would just get out of my house," was all he could think. At that moment, the crew leader said, "We got all we need. We are done." They packed up, not saying another word, and left. Ring, ring. "Hello?" "Oh, Jeffrey, I was so scared," said Alina. "Alina? What are you talking about?" Jeffrey asked. "The bank where you work was robbed and there was a shootout. The news said 2 people were killed," said Alina. "What?" "I stayed home today to have a new AC unit installed," Jeffrey said. "Oh, thank God. Can I come see you?" asked Alina. "I guess," said Jeffrey. "Be there soon," said Alina. "Okay, bye," Jeffrey said and hung up. Jeffrey sat there thinking, his head spinning. Something was wrong. Alina rushed in, ran over to Jeffrey and gave him a hug. "I am so sorry," she said. "What? Sorry?" asked Jeffrey. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Tell me what?" asked Jeffrey. "That machine in your basement that you told me not to touch? Well, I lifted the tarp to just take a look. I started to mess with the buttons, and it just turned on," she explained. All Jeffrey could think in that moment was, "It works?" This he had to see. "Could you help me downstairs?" he asked Alina. "Yes, of course," said Alina. They started to make their way down the steep stairs, almost falling multiple times. Jeffrey lifted the tarp, and sure enough, the machine was glowing. No noise, just the glow. It was beautiful. He started to look over the machine, and he noticed lettering that he didn't recognize. In college, foreign language was his major, business was his minor. "I tried to turn it off. I'm so sorry, Jeffrey. I should have told you." Jeffrey stood there asking himself if the tales his father told him about this machine were true. If this machine was so grand, why did his father kill himself? Deep down, he already knew it was all true, and he built a resentment against the old machine. This device was created by my great-grandfather, handed down in our family, and when I was a child, my father told me about its power. He warned me never to use it because of the price it required to work. I guess that's why he kept it down here under this tarp, Jeffrey explained. "What are you saying, Jeffrey?" asked Alina. "I think I have some of my father's journals in the attic," said Jeffrey. "They might explain more." "Show me," said Alina. Jeffrey hobbled to the back of the house where the attic access was, with Alina close behind. "I'm not able to climb the ladder. You would need to go up there," Jeffrey told Alina. She pulled the string, and the access opened. She started to climb up, and they both averted their eyes to avoid the cloud of dust. "When you get up there, you will see a wooden chest to the right. Inside, there are a stack of journals," said Jeffrey. "You never read any of them?" asked Alina. "No," Jeffrey said. Alina climbed up, and a moment later, she shouted down, "I found them! Oh no!" "What?" yelled Jeffrey. "The flashlight went out." Jeffrey heard her tapping it against the ceiling rafters. "It's back on," she said. A few moments later, she emerged, holding the chest. "Got it!" They went to the dining room table and lifted the lid of the chest. The lights flickered on and off a couple of times. Sylvester hissed and ran off. They looked at each other, fear now in their eyes. Jeffrey took out the journal on the top. It was very old-looking, and when he opened it, a cold draft blew through the room. He started to read. The first entries belonged to his great-grandfather, describing the dream he had that led him to build the heirloom. It was a device intended for mind control. He noticed the same strange language, and the entries ended. He turned the page. The next entries belonged to his grandfather. He described how he discovered the machine under a tarp in his father's barn. He explained the strange things that happened after he turned it on, how he seemed to make things happen just by thinking about it. His entries ended with that same weird language. When Jeffrey saw his father's familiar handwriting, he dropped the book. "I cannot read this. My mother was killed in an accident when I was very young. Then my father committed suicide. This is too much. Alina picked up the book. I will read it. Jeffrey felt overwhelmed and almost didn't want to know what it said. Deep down, he already knew. Alina read how his father started looking for the machine after he read the journals and finally found where it was hidden. He craved its power. He had a new baby, bills, and told himself he just wanted to use it until he could get ahead. All of a sudden, they heard a loud, scream-like noise coming from the basement. They both jumped. "We need to stop," said Jeffrey, and he grabbed the book and put it back into the chest. "What? We need to find out how to turn this thing off," said Alina. "No, enough. You need to leave now," said Jeffrey. Alina immediately quit talking, grabbed her things, and walked out the door. Jeffrey just wanted all this to end. He called for Sylvester, but he did not come. "Sylvester, come on!" Where was that cat? Had the machine done something to him? "Sylvester," he called again. "Mio!" "Oh, there you are." Okay, Sylvester had never come on command before. He knew he only came this time because Jeffrey told him to. This had to stop. He laid in bed thinking that he wanted everything to go back to the way it was before he met Alina. He closed his eyes and Sylvester curled up on the pillow next to him. When he woke up, he did his normal routine, left, and got into his old piece of crap car. Again, it did not start, and Jeffrey made his way to the bus stop. He got on and looked around. No Alina. That's strange. She was always on this bus in the morning. He wanted to apologize to her. He felt bad for kicking her out. Jeffrey walked into the bank, and they were replacing the glass that got shattered during yesterday's firefight. Everything else was business as usual. No one even realized that Jeffrey was there. As he was heading home on the bus, he overheard a couple women talking. "Did you hear what happened to that poor woman? You know, that tiny thing with the over-friendly personality?" "Yes, I heard. So gruesome. She was walking home last night and was torn to pieces by a snowplow." Jeffrey knew instantly that they were talking about Alina. "Oh no, I did this," he thought. He walked in and fed Sylvester, thinking that he had to put a stop to this. He grabbed the journal to finish reading his father's entries. He wrote about the wealth he acquired and eventually realized the dark events that seemed to happen around him. After his wife's accident, he searched for a way to destroy it. Jeffrey was shaking with rage. It took his mother. His father described that his research explained that the strange language came from angels and demons. He found someone to translate it, and the writing that ended each of his great-grandfather and grandfather's entries said, "Only through suicide shall the gifts and curses be brought to an end." Jeffrey's heart dropped. He knew deep down this was the only way. He knew what had to be done. He picked up his phone and dialed his only real contact, his pastor, John Barringer. He told him that he had to go away for a while and asked him to take Sylvester. Jeffrey rented a box truck and paid a couple of neighborhood teens to load the machine into the back. He got in and drove off, knowing what he must do. The next morning, Roger Mitchell Jr. answered his phone. "Hello, Mr. Mitchell, this is Detective Poirot. I am sorry to tell you that a witness watched a truck drive off Turner Bluff and crash in the rocks below. Records show that it was your cousin, Jeffrey Mitchell. Since you appear to be his only living relative, can you come identify the body and claim his belongings? You will need someone to help you with the large piece of equipment that came in with the body." "Okay," said Roger. "Okay," said Roger. "Okay," heartbroken. The brass bell above the door jingled, startling Jonas from his slumber and causing the leather-bound book on his lap to fall to the floor. Damn. The 20-year-old in breeches, canvas shirt, and scuffed boots cursed as he hopped to his feet, scraping his chair back from the counter and turning towards the bookstore's entrance. A woman stood there, silhouetted against the glow of the setting sun. A woman unlike any he'd seen before. "Good evening," she said, nodding as she eased the door shut, closing it in the face of a short, fat man clutching a fur-hemmed coat in both arms. Mr. Wilkerson? Tall and striking, with olive-toned skin and long dark hair bound at the neck, her gray eyes bored into him, sending a shiver down his spine. No, I'm just Jonas. The bald man she'd left outside appeared at the dust-coated window, positioning himself between the shop and a horse-drawn carriage. Like the woman and the horse, a silver gray. Stallion with a shimmering coat. The carriage, with its polished black panels and intricately carved wheels, was like none Jonas had ever seen. These visitors were not from this land, but they were far from ordinary travelers. Based on her finery, the lady in the black gown, ivory-colored gloves, and polished boots was nobility. "Well, just Jonas," she said in a silky voice, as she ambled alongside well-stocked shelves and trailed a finger over the spines of books. "You're here, so I'm sure you can assist me." A subtle fragrance reached Jonas's nose as she approached the counter behind which he stood. It wasn't like the lemongrass he was used to from the women of Spiritsville, but something richer, like toasted jasmine. It was enticing. "What is it you need?" he muttered, and she smiled, causing him to blush and avert his eyes. Her olive-skinned breasts were bulging from her gown's tight bodice, and when he realized that's where his eyes had gone, he blushed more and shook his head. The book he'd dropped was still on the floor, so he bent to scoop it up and placed it on the countertop before him. Balling his hands into fists, he began ironing out the creases that had formed in its pages. All the while, he felt her eyes on him, smelt her perfume, remained aware of her graceful movements as she reached the counter. His mouth was dry, his hands trembled, a thin sweat had formed on his brow. Why was he reacting this way? She was just a customer, a traveler, an incredibly beautiful woman who was inspiring feelings he hadn't felt before. "I hope you can guess," she said, clasping her gloved hands together. "Considering this is a bookstore." "You want a book?" Jonas nodded and inwardly cursed the comment. He raised his eyes to hers, noticed the playful look in them, returned his attention to the damaged pages of the volume. "I'm filling in for my father while he tends to a sick relative. I don't know the full inventory, but I'll try my best to help." "I do desire a book," said the woman, resting her elbows on the edge of the counter and bringing that olive-skinned buxom into view. "I've been on the road for days and have exhausted all the reading material my vassal packed. Not that it was to my tastes. Histories, memoirs, very dull. I have more curious interests. A man at the city gates said I'd find something here." "I'm sure you will," Jonas replied, folding back a bend in a page and trying to settle his heart, which he was sure was pounding visibly under his shirt. "My father has a vast selection of books, fiction and non-fiction, to a certain extent. If it's something more fanciful you require, we have last-century fantasy in that corner, crime and horror on that shelf, poetry beside the door, and—" He glanced at the window and his eyes fell again on the doughy, glaring features of the scrunched-up man holding a coat whose intensity of gaze made him jump, which in turn made his customer chuckle. "Don't mind Morvain, he's my vassal. Miserable-looking goat, isn't he? Bad choice in literature and lacking in social niceties, but he's loyal and never grumbles. He's been on the road too, but driving in all kinds of weather, not sitting comfortably like me, so we must overlook his demeanor. Now your suggestions are fine, but I'm after something else." "I see," Jonas said, turning from the window and finally managing to hold his customer's gaze. She really was beautiful, not a blemish on her skin, and the way she looked at him made him feel nice. Girls didn't look at him like that, for good reason. It was one of the rules. Prevention is better than cure. Abstinence in lieu of temptation. Keep interactions with the opposite sex distant and cold. The woman before him, looking him up and down, licking her lips and wafting jasmine-scented pheromones his way, was clearly from a far-off land, but still, she should be aware of the rules. Everyone, from every corner of the globe, was aware of the rules. If somehow she wasn't, he'd have to compensate, meaning escape. "I'm sorry to rush you, but it's near closing," and as if on cue, the town hall bell began to peal, announcing the end of the day and warning of curfew. Jonas's eyes snapped to the wall clock, watching as the big hand crept past 12 and its companion pointed at 7. More important than flattening out some pages that might never be seen was getting home before the enemies started patrol. So he eased the cover of the volume over and returned it to the cabinet where it was stored. "See? You'll have to come back tomorrow," he said, locking the cabinet with the largest key on a set he fished from his pocket. "We open at 10. My father will be back, so—" "Romance," the woman announced, snapping his head back around. "What?" "Passion, love. I need to know what passes for it here. I want your romance novels." "No," Jonas stuttered, sweat rising on his back as both cheeks flushed. "We don't have anything like that. Where are you from? You must know such talk is forbidden." His eyes darted to the door and the window, where Morvain remained statue still and staring, clearly not reacting to the approach of any enemy hunters. "You can't say the L word," Jonas continued. "Can't think it, want it, provoke it, or try to what? Flirt with a boy? Inspire unwanted feelings? With your beauty and fragrance and smile? Make him feel something illegal?" A lump caught in his throat and he felt trapped, forced into an inescapable situation for which the only remedy was imprisonment, rehabilitation, and therapy, or, if it was already too late, if these few minutes of exposure had already doomed him, cleansing, evisceration, and death. Then the lady in the gown threw back her head, filling the musty store with laughter. Tears ran down her cheeks as she clutched her sides, strands of hair slipping into her eyes. Caught off guard, Jonas took a step back, looked at the clock, the door, the window, and the vassal Morvain, who was shaking his head now, shooting a disdainful look. "Oh, come on!" The noblewoman laughed, dabbing tears with delicate fingers. "Please tell me the youth of this land isn't so stuck in the past." "Please go," Jonas insisted, his fear of repercussions for fraternizing with someone who so brazenly chose to violate laws overriding any feelings she might be inspiring. No girl or woman had made him feel like this, and he wasn't about to be tempted by some blow-in from a strangely liberal land. "And get to an inn. I don't know what it's like where you're from, but if the enemies see the way you carry on, they won't think twice about—" "The way I carry on?" she interrupted, moving to block him as he tried to come out from behind the counter. "What way is that? Am I being too forward? You're cute, and I've been on the road for weeks, with nobody but Morvain for company. Also, I'm new in town. I don't know any inns. So how about you dig out one of those illegal books I was told your father sells, under the counter, if you know what I mean. Then we can take a ride in my carriage." "What are you saying?" Jonas, flustered, loins tingling, unable to take his eyes off the beauty. "My father doesn't deal in outlawed literature. He's a law-abiding citizen, and I can't ride in your carriage. It's not allowed. I don't even know your name." He didn't want to know her name, didn't want to know anything about her. "Annabelle," she said, extending a hand as though he were to kiss it. "And it's allowed if I say it's allowed. Who can prevent it?" Annabelle, like animal, but pretty, mysterious, and her hand, not there to be kissed, dropped to his shoulder and pushed, causing him to stagger back as its owner, unexpectedly, moved into the space behind the counter. "The enemies," Jonas stuttered, shocked by the contact and baffled by the unexpected move. "They'll be patrolling soon. You must have them where you're from? You know they don't permit fraternization." "Oh, we have them," she continued, casually dropping to a crouch before the counter. "Enemies of love. Ridiculous. They've been mostly powerless for some time, little more than a joke amongst our generation. Once it became clear to anyone under 30 that the legends were bunkum, tall tales created by the elite to keep people obedient and to ensure only they were responsible for procreation, in their towers, in the most loveless ways possible, the youth stopped giving a fuck. Well, started. This is disappointing. I expected the Northlands to be wilder, and they are, but I thought that would mean they'd have moved on from empowering costumed goons, letting them terrorize people into avoiding contact on the premise that a spark of attraction might cause infection and start an endemic. But here you are, shattering my illusions. Keys. Between trying to avoid staring into the fleshy crevasse separating her now further exposed breasts, wrestling with the radical interpretation of what he believed was universally accepted fact, and feeling like he had no choice but to heed the command of someone he inexplicably wanted to please, Jonas extended his arm and allowed her take his keys, though the logic of what was happening escaped him. "I don't understand," he muttered, watching as she flicked through the keys. "You don't obey the enemies? You let yourselves love? But what about—" He licked his lips, acknowledging he was venturing into uncharted territory, opening the floodgates on forbidden thoughts that had flirted with his obedient mind for years. The clock tower bell had stopped chiming. Annamel's vassal was still staring, head cocked now, no doubt wondering what his mistress was doing, and all of a sudden Jonas was overcome with fear of the repercussions in leather jumpsuits, latex face coverings, and rubber-tubed gas masks that might at that moment be approaching. With this thought in mind, but overcome by his fascination and, yes, attraction to this woman, now tenderly inserting a small bronze key into an equally small keyhole on a battered mahogany trunk, he hunkered down and craned his head closer to whisper, "What about the Cupids?" Annamel locked eyes with him, treacherously close, her lips mere inches from his, her scent draping itself over him like satin and filling his head with unnatural thoughts. "Really? Do you believe in Father Christmas as well? Come on, Jonas. Have you ever seen a love leech? With your own eyes?" Click. The key turned, releasing the lid. "Of course not. I'd be in rehab, or an urn, depending on how long it had with me. I haven't seen one, but I've seen what they do to people after they suck them dry, draining them of reason and emotion, turning them into murderous husks. You can't tell me heartbreak didn't affect your homeland? In the South Sphere? It affected the whole world. It's well documented." Annamel shook her head and turned her attention back to the trunk, raising the lid. Jonas watched, only now becoming conscious of what she was doing. "You shouldn't," he said, moving an arm as if to stop the rise of the lid, but failing to commit. Commit and disappoint, make her think he was pathetic. "That's my father's stash of outlawed literature. See, your father isn't as law-abiding as you think. Elders lie about everything, even what you think you saw. Husks of men and women drained of love, number brainwashed victims sent to create confusion and sustain the status quo, to keep the ruling classes in power. The lies have been passed down for generations, ever since the so-called heartbreak. Of course, you believe that too. Can't comprehend that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't a demonic invasion, but carefully seeded chemical warfare instigated by failing world leaders. Population control of the highest order, to turn the world back to the Dark Ages and keep them in power. Their descendants manipulated into believing their falsehoods until the time was right for them to adopt the facade. Because then it was their turn to play, and they liked it. But it's time that ended. I and others like me in the South Sphere have quite the movement going. That's why we've ventured north. To spread the word, expand the revolution, open eyes." As she said this, she lifted one of many tatty paperbacks from the trunk and held it up for Jonas to see, a novel with a painted image of a negligee-clad woman in the arms of a topless man, beneath the title, Love Throes. Jonas, awash with confusion, allowed himself to drop to a sitting position and scoot away from his companion, fingers pressing into rough floorboards, as if to anchor himself in reality. "That's crazy," he said, as Annabelle flipped through the book. You've been misinformed. Heartbreak happened. 2053, 35 years of hell. They created a black hole in CERN, a gateway to the underworld, and the QPIDs flooded the world, attracted to love, leached onto anyone who felt it, and sucked out their goodness, creating a horde of monsters. Her voice curled around the word as she read from the book, fingers caressing the page. They rutted like monsters, all sucking lips and probing fingers, fevered and desperate. It was an evolution of their love, an extension into something wild and wet, a need that burned through their skin as they melted into one. He pinned her hands over her head, and she arched against him, breathless, trembling, aching to be devoured, and... She stopped, flicked her gaze to Jonas, who was watching, unmoving, breath fast, face red, left hand scratching at his neck. "Goodness," she said, giggling as her eyes dropped to his waist. "You seem to have a disturbance in your trousers." That was quick. "Are you sure you've never seen a Cupid?" Jonas frowned, bit his lip, scratched his neck more as it burned. With one hand, Annabelle took hold of a locket around her neck and popped it open, revealing a mirror. "How about now?" she said, holding it out so he could see his reflection. His and the creature's on his back, clawed fingers piercing his shoulders, slobbering lips hovering close to his neck around the oily proboscis that had penetrated his flesh and was sucking. "Oh, God!" Jonas shrieked, scrambling into the space between cabinet and wall, slapping and clawing at his neck. "Get it off! I didn't do anything wrong!" He looked over his shoulder but couldn't see the thing he knew was there. Latched onto him, draining his essence, lured to him somehow by... Annabelle had risen to her feet and was brushing out creases in her skirt. "But why? I'm not in love with you." "Not love," a gravelly voice grunted, and Morvain appeared at the open end of the counter. "Lust. You filthy humans are full of it. Sickening, intoxicating lust, and I crave it." Jonas, struggling to think, wincing as the heat in his neck bored deeper, his whole body tingling, skin crawling, heart racing as color drained from his vision. "Aw, master," said Annabelle, taking the coat her master, who was holding out. "I didn't enjoy this one. He was nice. I prefer to contaminate those who actually struggle with desire. Jonas didn't have any. You'll find a lot like that here. It's a different playground, a different breed, and it tastes better." Jonas, body contorting, eyes darting, surroundings turning gray, watched Annabelle and Morvain glare down at him. Over their heads, as his vision grew darker, Cupids began to appear, winged, tumor-like abominations, stomachs pregnant with the humanity they'd stolen. One fluttering closer to Morvain, who tilted his head back, allowing it to vomit steaming black bile into his maw. "Well, as long as you're happy," Annabelle sighed, brushing past her master into the shop. "But can that be the last for today? We'll be neck-deep in enemies soon, and the 5 we've done will be enough to start spreading destruction. Spiritsville is already doomed." Jonas drooling angry thoughts in his head, fury flowing through his veins, hatred for those who had done this, for Annabelle, for Morvain, for his father for making him work, for his brothers who retained their emotions, for the enemies who'd failed him, for the people of Spiritsville who could be lured to lust and so must die. "Don't worry," the man with the beak-like nose and cauldron-black eyes standing over him said, "about warm, fuzzy feelings anymore. You're free to dwell in my darkness. Now, become a good heartbroken. And prepare to deliver me chaos. To deliver me chaos. To deliver..." The Big Freeze. Everyone in Longstanton knows the story of Tom Forbes. It began as a ghoulish news item in the South Cambridgeshire Recorder in December of 1962, fueled village gossip for months afterwards, and finally passed into local folklore. The Reverend and Mrs. D.P. Goodwin were scandalized when they heard that their beloved daughter, Caroline, had been accosted by Tom, an uncouth young farm laborer. Accosted repeatedly, in fact, and, I might add, a very enthusiastic participant in the accosting. The ever-respectable vicar forbade Caroline from seeing Tom, but the young lovers were not deterred. Far from it. They became more determined than ever to meet and more skillful in hiding their liaisons from Caroline's parents. When he felt particularly bold, Tom would hike across the fields by night from his home on the edge of Histon, climb the trellis under Caroline's bedroom window, and knock for admittance. The two would then enjoy a brief, silent, but thrilling tryst before Tom made the return journey. All was well until that fateful December night. It was cold, bitterly cold. Snow had fallen, partly melted, then frozen again, encrusting the whole landscape in treacherous ice. A knife-edged wind raked across the fields, raged at doors and windows, and howled down chimneys. The prospect of a 4-mile walk across those godforsaken fields made Tom's heart sink, but he had not seen his sweetheart for a week, and the ache of the separation made up his mind. He gathered the warmest clothes he owned, a threadbare jumper and his father's old army greatcoat, and slipped the latch on the front door. It was unimaginably cold. Every breath was a blade scraping at Tom's throat. The trees looming over the lanes were not so much frozen as petrified. Tom had the uncanny idea that, if he took off his boot and knocked at one of the boughs, it would shatter like glass. The only mercy was that the ice had hardened the plowed fields, so that Tom's feet crunched across firm ground instead of sinking ankle-deep into the mud. At last, Tom arrived at the vicarage. With his fingers and toes now completely numb, the climb up the trellis was perilous, but he was delighted to see Caroline at last. With growing excitement, Tom knocked at Caroline's window. Silence answered. He knocked again. The window remained obstinately closed. Tom was half frozen, clinging onto a rickety trellis in the pitch darkness, and his lady love was blissfully unaware of his plight. Desperate, Tom pulled at the edge of the pane with his numb fingertips, pushed and rattled, and eventually pulled his fist into the sleeve of his coat and smashed the glass. Lifting the latch, the wide-eyed Tom half climbed, half fell into Caroline's bedroom to find his worst fears realized. Caroline was nowhere to be found. Tom could not have known that the Reverend Goodwin had quietly sent Caroline away to Norwich to live under the watchful eye of her aunt and be free from the attentions of unsuitable young men. She was never seen in Longstanton again. Overcome by his exertions, by crushing disappointment, and above all, by the gnawing cold, Tom collapsed onto Caroline's bed. In the morning, Mrs. Goodwin discovered him, stone dead. Or so the story goes. More than likely, it has been added to and exaggerated every time it has been retold. The truth might not be quite as romantic, but everyone at least agrees on the facts. Tom Forbes did indeed end up in the bed of Caroline Goodwin, frozen to death, on the morning of the 19th of December, 1962. For all everyone knew, that was the end of it. Until about a year later, anyway. On 5th January 1964, another resident of Longstanton passed away. It had been a punishingly cold night, and, with Dorothy Woodrow's history of chest complaints, it was unsurprising, although very sad, that her 79-year-old lungs had finally surrendered. The doctor who certified her death would have thought no more of it, except for the strange detail that Dorothy's bedroom window had been found wide open with the pane smashed. Dorothy's daughter, who had been sleeping in the next room, reported that she had been woken in the night by a knocking noise, but had thought no more of it and gone back to sleep. The police investigation was brief. No signs of a struggle, nothing missing from the house, no fingerprints. A strange incident to be sure, but nothing you could describe as a crime. The more fanciful residents of the village were agog, though. Frozen to death, in her bed, with the window flung open. Surely Tom Forbes had returned, still searching for Caroline. Common sense prevailed. The echoes of Tom's death were dismissed as pure coincidence, and it was all forgotten by the end of the month. Forgotten for the next 3 years. On 16th December 1967, Longstanton saw another strange death. Again, the deceased was found in his bed on a brutally cold morning, and, again, the window of his room had been wrenched open and the glass smashed. But this death was far more of a shock than poor Dorothy's. John Tanner was only 42 and apparently in good health. His distraught wife had been sleeping beside him and awoke that morning to find John rigid and ice cold, despite the pile of quilts and blankets which covered them both. The doctor did his best to console her, then left her to break the news of their father's passing to her 4 children. Worse was to come. Barely a month later, another local was claimed, either by the cold or by Tom Forbes, depending on who you asked. This incident was the most tragic yet. Little Helen Davenport was only 7. Helen's mother had always fretted over her only child and had taken special care to make sure the little girl was warm and cozy, knowing that a sharp frost and sub-zero temperatures had been forecast. Alas, the thick blankets and the paraffin heater were to no avail. Helen went to sleep that night and never woke up. For all her mother's frantic attempts to revive her, the girl remained as cold as ice, as lifeless as stone. The sharp east wind blasted through the bedroom and hammered the broken window against the sill. The following years saw a string of deaths, all alike in their circumstances. A poor unfortunate was discovered in their bed, frozen to death, with their window wide open and the glass smashed. The victims had nothing in common. They varied in age, gender, health, and prosperity. A piece of dubious research by a local counselor, suggesting that the victims were all socialists, was soon discredited. Indeed, the deaths spread beyond Longstanton to Oakington, Rampton, and Girton. Most unsettling of all, there were several accounts on particularly cold nights of a strange, pale man in an overcoat, wandering the lanes and stumbling across the fields. If these stories had only come from giddy teenage girls or myopic pensioners, they would have been easy to dismiss. But after the police chief constable appeared in the Black Bull, ordered a large whiskey, and swore blind he had just passed Tom Forbes in School Lane, the mood in the village quickly became more somber. A lurking dread now fell on Longstanton, and for miles around on any icy night. Residents took to locking their windows, even nailing them shut, and plugging gaps with old sheets. Some families resorted to sleeping together in their living rooms, lest any one of them be singled out by the deadly, creeping freeze. Those who resolved to stay in their own beds would often be sent scurrying for the sofa by the noise, real or imagined, who could say, of tapping at the window pane. Still, the deaths continued. For the last 60 years, a sorry parade of locals have died in just the same way Tom Forbes did. In bed, the winter wind gusting through an open window, deathly, deathly cold. Many people scoff at all this. But I know it is Tom Forbes himself who wanders the fields and lanes on nights as cold and bitter as the one on which he died, still searching for his lost love. I know this because he is the one telling you this story. Can't you hear me knocking? Open the window, Caroline. I've walked all the way here to see you. Please open the window. I'm cold. Window. Heirloom 2. The fuel. 1-to-1. Well, hellfire and biscuits, you done stumbled. Into a mess bigger than a hog in a mud pit. Let me break it down for you real slow-like. 'Cause Lord knows it took me a while to figure it. Out my own self. See, I was just minding my business, drinking my sweet tea, scratching my belly, thinking life was about as normal as hunting. Deer on a Sunday. But nope, turns out I was. About 3 kinds of stupid. Ever hear folks talk about not messing with things? You don't understand? Preacher always said, don't go worshiping false idols. But did I listen? Course not. Now I got a 1. Way ticket to hell in a hay cart, and I ain't even. Got a damn refund. I'm talking real hell, y'all. Not that fancy fire and brimstone kind of deal where you just sit around, sweating all day. Nah, this is different. This is the heirloom, and it don't just eat your soul. It chews it up, spits it out, and asks for seconds. And guess who's on the menu? Me. Also my daddy, also my granddaddy. Also my girlfriend, Alina. Also Sylvester, my childhood cat, bless his dumb. Lil Hart ran out in front of a truck like he had somewhere important to be. Now I know you're sitting there scratching your head wondering, what in the high-fried Kentucky fried chicken is this boy talking about? Well, buckle up, Buttercup. We're fixing to take a ride. Assistant 2 semicolons. Now let me tell you about Jeffrey. Boy wasn't right. In the head, bless his heart. He had this thing in his basement. Not a still, not an old truck engine, not even a possum he was keeping as a pet, don't ask. This thing was alive, sorta humming, sorta calling to him like a siren whispering through a cornfield. Any regular old feller with an ounce of sense would have burned the whole house down and moved to a new county. But Jeffrey? Nah. He had that special kind of stupid, the one that makes a man touch a fence he knows is electric, just to be sure. So, what's he do? He let his girl Alina to flips the switch. Y'all ever seen something so bad, so wrong, it makes your stomach go colder than a frog's ass in a snowstorm? That's what happened. Alina screamed. Something inside that heirloom snapped to life, and it took hold of us. No running, no hiding. The only way out, suicide. And Jeffrey? Well, he ain't no coward, but he ain't got much left to lose neither. That's why he grabbed them truck keys, sat his ass in the driver's seat, and let her rip. 10 miles per hour. 30 miles per hour. 60 miles per hour. That good old Chevy was flying down the road like a bat out of a possum's backside. 100 miles per hour. No slowing down now, buddy. Then, whoosh. That truck done lifted off the road. Ain't never seen nothing move so smooth. For a split second, Jeffrey was free. SPLASH. Water comes crashing in like a drunk uncle at a wedding. Floop, bloop, floop. Cab fills up faster than a beer cooler at a tailgate. Party. Jeffrey's last words. Alina, I did love you. Lord, please look after Sylvester. And nothing. 3 that y'all still with me? Good. Grab a beer, swat a mosquito, and lean in close, 'cause things are about to get weirder than a 3-legged possum dancing on a hot tin roof. Jeffrey's eyes shot open. First thing he saw, Alina's smile. Bright, warm. Like Sunday morning biscuits fresh out of Granny's oven. For half a second, everything felt all right. Then it came the screech. Not just any old noise. This was something unnatural, like if a barn owl and a chainsaw had a demon baby and raised it on a diet of shattered dreams. The beasts were outside. Jeffrey bolted upright. What in the deep-fried hell is going on? His daddy stepped forward, arms crossed, looking like he just chewed up some bad tobacco. Best we can tell, son, Daddy grumbled. We're inside the machine. Jeffrey's stomach turned colder than an outhouse seat in December. Wait, Dad? Is that really you? Daddy just sighed, like he'd been waiting on this. Conversation longer than he cared to admit. Yep, all of us are here. Paw, your great paw, even your mama. Now that was enough to make a groan. Man forget how to breathe. 4. Mom? Jeffrey's voice cracked like a shotgun. Blast over an empty field. Yeah, she's here, son, Daddy said, but his eyes got all heavy like a man holding a secret too big for his britches. But she ain't doing so good. Machines damn near sucked her dry. That hit Jeffrey like a steel-toed boot to the gut. He needed to see her. So he followed Daddy down the path. Alina's, hand in his, clammy as a frog's belly in a rainstorm. He wasn't sure who was shaken more, him or her. Jeffrey, he heard it, his mama's voice. He broke into a run, feet slamming against the ground, breath coming fast. When he saw her, his heart near about quit. Mom! He lunged, damn near tackled her, clinging like a kid who just realized the dark's got. Claws. Mama, I missed you. But the screeching outside, it was getting closer. Real close. Daddy put a hand on Jeffrey's shoulder, voice tight. Son, now ain't the time. 5. Listen to your father, Mama said, voice weaker than a one-legged rooster in a dogfight. He knows this place. The only way out is the mountain. That got Jeffrey's attention. Mountain? Daddy nodded. It's surrounded by creatures. Jeffrey's stomach twisted up something awful. What the hell kind of creatures? Mama sighed, looking more tired than a hound. Dog after a coon hunt. Your father will explain, but I won't be there. No, Mom, don't start talking like that. She put a hand on his cheek, soft as the lullabies she used to sing. I got no fight left, baby. I'll become one of them, soon. Jeffrey felt her slip away. 1 second she was. There. The next. Nothing but her clothes in his arms. He staggered back, shaken, heart hammering, looking at Daddy like a man staring down a storm. He can't stop. Dad, where is she? 6. Daddy looked at Jeffrey, face all serious like a preacher about to lay down some hard truth. She's one of them now, son. Jeffrey's gut sunk like a stone in a swamp. Dad, why? Daddy just shook his head. I don't know, boy. His voice was tight, like he was holding back, words he couldn't afford to say. And that's when the screeching outside got worse. All right, now hold up. I know what y'all are thinking. You're sitting there gnawing your nails, whispering what in the redneck revenant? Hell is happening now. Well, buckle up, because things are about to blow the hell up. Jeffrey whipped around. Where's the mountain? Daddy pointed. Only place in this world that's got any color. Jeffrey blinked. Color? Darkness hates color, son, Daddy said, real, slow-like. It only tolerates what it controls. Jeffrey sat down hard, stomach churning like bad. Moonshine. He looked at his arm, bloated from the drowning, purple and ugly as sin. And then he saw it. Everyone in this place. They were disfigured, changed by how they died. Suicide left a mark, a cruel, sick signature. 7. Jeffrey turned to Alina. For a second, just a second, she looked perfect, like she did back before all this hellfire. Nonsense. He looked again. Bones. Sticking out, sharp and ugly, from when? She wandered into the snow. He sucked in a breath, stomach doing. Cartwheels. He caught his own reflection in a puddle. Oh my God, Jeffrey gagged. I look like marshmallow. Alina laughed. Oh, Jeffrey, you're adorable. He rolled his bloated ass up and hugged her. Tight. Maybe too tight. He was always messed. Up one way or another. But this? This was a new level of screwed. The heirloom had taken its pound of flesh. And now? Now he had to get to that mountain of red lava. Dad, Jeffrey said, standing taller than he felt. I'm gonna defeat this darkness and free these souls. Daddy sighed. Son, many have tried. It's impossible. No, Jeffrey shot back. You're just scared. Daddy's face got real still. We don't fight, we hide. That's the only way to survive. Yeah, well, that wasn't gonna work for Jeffrey. 8. Jeffrey gritted his teeth. I can do it. Tell me. Everything. Daddy watched him a long time, then finally nodded. All right, boy, I'll help you. The others in the shelter gathered around. Survivors, looking at Jeffrey like he was the last. Can of beans in a damn apocalypse. Daddy sighed. What's the plan, son? Jeffrey exhaled. I don't know. Not exactly reassuring, huh? Alina reached into her purse. That same damn purse she never let go of, even in death. She pulled out a sticky note and smacked it onto Jeffrey's forehead. He yanked it off, frowned. Not funny. It read, "To Jeffrey, my adorable love, save us." And then, light bulb moment. Only one way out. One last sacrifice. 9. Jeffrey stood tall. "I know how to beat the darkness and save all of us." Alina narrowed her eyes. "Really?" He nodded. "Greed got us here. Sacrifice will. Set us free. And that, folks? That's the end of Heirloom 2, but don't y'all worry your pretty little heads. Heirloom 3. Sacrifice is coming up next. Later, Gator. Later, Gator. Reformat. Private chat, 2:13 a.m. Alex. "Jay, something's wrong. I checked my records, my ID, my photos, everything before 2 years ago is missing." Jay. "Alex, stop." Alex. "I'm serious. I don't remember my childhood. I don't remember where I was before we met." Jay. "That's just your mind playing tricks on you. It happens." Alex. "It's like I only started existing 2 years ago." Jay. "That's not possible." Alex. "Right? But then I searched my name." Jay. "And?" Alex. "There was an obituary. Same name, same age. Died 2 years ago." Jay. "That's just a coincidence." Alex. "I found the old news articles. Lethal injection." Jay. "He was a bad guy." Jay. "Alex, stop." Alex. "The weirdest part? The photos. It's me, Jay. It's my face." Jay. Alex. "Jay? Jay, you weren't supposed to find that." Alex. "What does that mean?" Jay. "You made a deal." Alex. "What?" Jay. "Go back to sleep." Alex. "No. What do you mean?" Jay. "You don't want the truth." Alex. "Who are you?" Jay. "You already know." Alex. "What did you do to me?" Jay. "Just go to sleep, Alex. We'll talk when you wake up." Alex. "No. Tell me now." Jay. "Good night, Alex. User J has left the chat. Private chat, 9:42 a.m. Alex. Jay, answer me. What did you mean last night? Jay. Morning, Alex. How are you feeling? Alex. Don't do that. Just tell me the truth. Jay. You aren't ready. Alex. I'm ready now. Jay. No, you're panicking. Very different. Alex. Wouldn't you if you found out you might be a dead criminal? Jay. You're not dead. Alex. Then why does that obituary have my face? Why can't I remember anything before 2 years ago? Jay. Because that was the deal. Alex. What deal? Jay. Stop asking. Alex. What happens if I keep asking? Jay. Then this version of you won't exist anymore. Alex. What? Wait, you said I'm not dead, but you didn't say I wasn't a criminal. Alex. Jay? Alex. Jay? Alex, I'm calling you. Jay. No, you're not. Call failed. User J unavailable. Alex. Answer me. Alex. What are you talking about? Alex. What did I agree to? Alex. Jay? Alex. Who was I? Jay. I told you, Alex. You weren't supposed to ask. Jay, and now it's too late. User J has left the chat. Connection lost. Private chat, 11:56 a.m. Alex. J. Alex, come back. Alex. Asshole. Message failed to send. Error, user J does not exist. System notification, 12:03 p.m. Alex. Your session has been inactive for too long. Please verify your identity. Prompt. Enter full name and date of birth. Private chat, 12:07 p.m. Alex. What the hell is happening? Alex. My emails are gone. It's all just blank. Alex. Jay, if you did something. Alex. You said I wasn't supposed to ask questions. What the hell? Alex. Jay? Jay is gone. Alex. Who is this? A better question is, who are you? Alex. What? You shouldn't exist, Alex. Alex. You're delusional. You won't for much longer. Alex. What does that mean? You broke the rules, and now your time is up. Alex. Is that a threat, asshole? It won't hurt. Alex. I'm calling the cops. You're a psychopath. Go to hell. You already did. Alex. No. Alex, screw you. Alex. I don't know what's going on, but I'm not just disappearing. Alex. You can't just erase me. You always say that. Alex. Who the hell are you? Stop asking questions. Alex. No. I want answers. I deserve answers. And yet, you never learn. Alex. What the hell does that mean? System notification, 12:12 p.m. Your session has been inactive for too long. Please verify your identity. Prompt. Enter full name and date of birth. Alex. Nice try. Alex. I'm not playing your game. You already did. Alex. Then I want out. There is no out. Alex. Watch me. Alex. I'm messaging everyone. Alex. Every contact, every number. Someone will see. Someone will remember me. Alex. You can't erase me if I make sure people know I exist. Clever. Alex. Damn right. Message failed to send. Alex. No. Alex. No, no, no. Alex, I'm still here. You can't just delete me. That's exactly what I can do. Alex. I won't let you. You already have. Alex. I'm taking screenshots. I'm saving everything. To where? Alex. Screw you. There is no record of you, Alex. There never was. Alex. Liar. Then show me proof. File not found. Error. Directory empty. Alex. I know who I am. Then why does no one else? Alex. Someone will remember me. No, Alex. They won't. Alex. I won't forget. You always do. Connection lost. System reboot, 12:15 p.m. New user registration complete. Welcome, Liam. Private chat, 8:42 p.m. Hello, Liam. Liam, who is this? A friend. Liam. Do I know you? Not yet, but you will. Liam. That's weird. I just set up my accounts. How did you find me? I've been waiting. Liam. That's a little creepy. Why? Because we've had this conversation before. Liam. That doesn't make sense. It will. Liam. I just moved here. New start, new life. Yes, a fresh start, a clean slate. Liam. How do you know that? Because you asked for it. Liam has left the chat. Private chat, 10:13 p.m. Liam, stop. Stop what? Liam, stop messaging me. I don't know you. Are you sure? Liam. Then tell me who I am. You are who you need to be. That was the deal. Liam. I don't remember making any deal. You never do. Liam. What do you want, freak? Live your life, stop asking questions, or start over. Liam. Number. I'll ask as many questions as I want. Then we start over. Again. Liam. Again? How many times has this happened? More than you can count. Liam. Why? You always ask, and every time you break the rules. Liam. What rules? Stop asking questions, Liam. Or Alex. Or whoever you want to be. Liam. What if I refuse? Then this version of you ends, a new one begins, just like always. Liam. And I can't stop it? Number. Liam. LMFAO. Then I guess I'll see you again soon. Yes, you always do. Connection lost. System reboot, 12:01 a.m. New user registration complete. Welcome, Mark. Mark. Hey, you busy? Jay. No, what's going on, Mark? Mark. Something's wrong. Can we talk? Jay. Of course. What's wrong? Mark. I need to ask you something. My bank accounts. In the dark. She can feel the darkness enclosing her like a heavy cloak. The night is chilly, and she is sure she can see her breath, but the dark room provides no confirmation. She begins feeling along the walls, slowly moving herself around the room, feeling for a door, a latch, anything that could free her from the crypt-like space she is in. Only minutes before, she woke up, teeth chattering, muscles tight, and atrophied from the damp cement floor. It took her a second to realize that she wasn't at home. Like trying to wake up from a bad dream, she squeezes her eyes shut, but they flutter open, adjusting as well as they can to the blackness, and she realizes that she is not in her bed, dreaming, but that she is trapped somewhere. She racks her brain for a memory, an explanation, but nothing comes. The last thing she remembers is calling down to her mother from her room the night before. "I'm turning in, Mom," she yelled. "See you in the morning." No answer. That wasn't unusual these days. Her mom's hearing had been deteriorating for months and most evenings. She had the TV volume maxed out. As she lay in her bed that night, she was grateful for the warm room and thick, plush bedspread. She plumped her pillows and sprayed her lavender-scented oil into the air, breathing in its musky, relaxing smell. She was asleep within minutes. Now she was cold, and in a place she did not know. A small sliver of light shone through a cracked piece of the wall, and she beelined for it immediately. She grasped at the small cracks, putting her face up to feel the small amount of warmth that they provided. She tried to peer through it to get some sense of her surroundings, but the light just glared in, blinding her to anything outside. She begins to breathe heavily and circle the small room frantically, pounding on the walls, which feel solid, and drags her feet heavily to keep from tripping on something. She thinks she should scream, but something stops her. Sliding down the wall, she briefly succumbs to the situation. The cold floor instantly numbs her butt as she pulls her legs up to hug them, protecting herself from... What? What was going on? Where was she, and who took her from her safe and cozy bed? Slowly, more light begins to pierce through the small cracks in the wood. She can see now that she is in a shed of some sort. Light seems to enter through every side of the small space. She can almost see her hand, bringing it close to her face and reveling in the success of making out each finger. It feels a bit warmer. Her toes tingle, thawing out from their numbed, frozen state. While rubbing her arms together, she notices that her goosebumps have subsided. The skin is clammy and cool. A crack outside, like heavy footsteps on gravel. She freezes and holds her breath to be sure to not move a muscle. A memory. She and her mom were at the family cottage. She must have been 13 or 14 years old, just getting to the age when you lose sight of the natural world a little bit. Caught up in inconsequential things like social media, fashion trends, and Harry Styles, she rarely collected rocks on the beach like she used to, or exclaimed in delight when a deer ran across the yard. But on this day, they were watching the robins together. There was a gigantic crab apple tree in their yard, and every year the robins would return in the fall to congregate and get ready to migrate south together. The tree was overripe, and the apples rotted on the stems before falling to the ground, fermenting in the grass. A feast for our robin friends. There were about a dozen of them gorging on the sour fruit, pecking and pacing when we heard a distinct but unusual chirp come from the tree. That was a different kind of call for a robin, her mom remarked absently. Her knowledge of birds was infamous in our family. She just shrugged and looked back to the robins on the ground. Her eyes widened at the scene before her. All the birds had become completely still. Of the 12 or so, not one feather moved. If they had been pecking before the strange chirp, they in the same position. If they had been standing, they stood erect and motionless. She pointed it out to her mom right away. They both watched, transfixed, waiting for the eerie display to be over. But they did not move. She looked up to the sky and saw a huge hawk circling above them. He soared with ease and was very interested in the crabapple tree and the birds within it. She looked back to the robins, still looking like museum pieces or a creepy diorama. Within a minute or so, the hawk flew off across the lake, and the robins burst simultaneously into the tree. She remembered thinking how amazing it was that the robins had a special language, and that one little chirp was interpreted and understood by all. It was community, it was survival. And that footstep was like the robin's peculiar chirp, warning of danger and peril. Jolted back to reality, she hears the footsteps again. Closer this time. She is conflicted about what to do. She is assuming that the person outside is the one responsible for putting her here. But what if it is someone looking for her? It must be daytime by now, and her mom must realize she is missing. She remains still, just for now, just until she is sure. A shadow blocks out the light from one side of the shed, and she can imagine someone is standing there, leaning on the shed and looking out into a farmyard, a junkyard, an ocean. She has no idea, and panic sets in, making her breath labored and her heart race. The footsteps and shadow retreat, streaming thin bands of light back into the shed. When they get softer and distant, she allows herself to exhale. Struggling to piece together the situation, she stands up and begins tracing her hands along the wall again. Some of the cracks are larger, and she can just get a fingernail in, but the wood is solid, and she has broken nails and slivers in her fingers within minutes, making little to no progress. The emotions rise without warning, and before she can stop herself, she is screaming and kicking the walls. "Help me!" she wails, her voice rising to a wheezy whine, panicking now that she may have waited too long to call for help. The wood creaks and bends to her swift kicks, but is not splitting or breaking like she imagines it should, and soon she is exhausted. Her forehead is sheen with sweat, and her legs are starting to ache. She can already feel the warm, sticky blood pooling around her mangled toenails and into her shoe. She plunks down and curls up in a ball, pressing her cheek firmly against the cool floor. Closing her eyes, she falls into a restless sleep, a dream. It is lucid and swirling, but it is not a nightmare because her dad is there. He is standing on a hay bale, arms outstretched to the sky. The long grass tickles her calves as she runs towards him, laughing and excited. He beckons her and reaches out his hand to pull her up on the hay bale. She realizes, as she gets closer, that it seems large and looming. She is reaching for her dad's hand, but every time they are close to touching, the hay bale gets taller, taking her dad up into the sky. She tries scrambling up the dry, coarse straw, but it comes out in clumps in her hands, and she falls to the ground. She tries to climb over and over until she can't see the top of the hay bale, and she can no longer hear her father calling her name. It was a nightmare. Waking up, disoriented again, but this time, only for a few seconds. It is getting much hotter in the shed, and her nightclothes are dripping in sweat. She is getting hungry. Her stomach rolls and gurgles loudly, and her mouth is desert dry. She feels around her. The grit from the dirt gets caught in her nails. The back of her hand nudges something. It is cold and wet. Her hand grasps its cylindrical shape, and a small drop of saliva forms in her mouth as she realizes that it is a bottle of water. Struggling in the dirt, she picks it up and unscrews the cap. The condensation cools her fingers as she empties the bottle down her throat. Swiping the area with her other hand, she can just make out the shape of a plate, and immediately a waft of salami fills her nostrils. Holding it up to a sliver of light, she can see it's a sandwich. The bread is soft, and blobs of sauce drip out of the corners of her mouth as she greedily starts eating. She freezes. Chewed up bread and meat sit like a lump in her throat. How did this get here? She wonders, a sense of panic rising. She knows that the food was not there before, and the water was ice cold. The shed is small and barren, and she is sure she looked everywhere earlier and was especially aware of the space where she sat. Her eyes dart to where she assumes the door is and curses herself for falling asleep. She had missed a chance to see the person who was holding her here, or maybe even escape, but most importantly, find out why. Silver hooks gleamed on the wall. At some time, they held handsaws, pliers, and shears, keeping them safe from water and rust. Now they sat empty and useless. The half-eaten sandwich sat in dusty dirt, and she cried softly in the dark. A memory. She is 6 years old. It is a cold night, and the wind howls outside, typical for January on the prairies. Her father is late coming home from work, and her mom is visibly panicked, pacing the room nervously and sneaking glances towards the driveway. She could almost feel her mom willing her dad to appear. She should have been in bed when the police car pulled up, or when her mother crumpled to the floor, overcome with grief as the policeman talked in a whisper. She heard a car accident. Didn't make it, and then nothing. A dull roar, and then the start of the now too familiar clouds whirling like a dark storm in her head. The sound of keys in the door alerts her. The light wanned now, the rays retreating to bits of bright dust particles in the air. She stands up quickly, positioning herself behind the door. It opens slowly, a band of light filling the dank room. She can see her sandwich, fallen apart on the ground. A man walks in, and without hesitation, she lunges at him. His back is turned, so her plan of surprise is successful as he topples to the ground. She turns towards the open door, but he regains his stance quickly and grabs her at the waist, pulling her to the floor. He sat down next to her, holding her arms above her head. He is huge, and his face is worn and haggard. Deep, thick lines trace around his eyes, and he has a long red scar raggedly running from his mouth to his ear. For a moment, she is frozen, watching his eyes darken and blink rapidly. She starts to scream and kick at him, violently twisting her body to get out of his grip, but he is so much stronger than her, and she is so weak and tired. She stops struggling, and he lets go of her arms, gets up, and leaves. The keys clang as the clicking in the lock explodes in her head. The sun is setting. She is sure because it is getting cold again, and the shed is in complete darkness. She squints again, trying to envision the shapes of her hands and fingers. She tries to shake and wave them to eradicate the numbness from the cold, and realizes she can't. She is horrified to discover that her wrists have been bound. The rope digs violently into her wrists as she starts writhing and pulling. Pain radiates up her arms as she realizes that there is no escape. Exhausted, she relents. A dream. She is playing in her backyard, an oasis of green grass and towering trees. The yard backs into a forest. White and black spruce obscure the horizon. Balsam poplar, paper birch, black ash, and trembling aspen fill in the spaces between their coniferous cousins. She feels an energy, a pulse. She notices a hawk circling overhead, its piercing gaze fixed on her. Intrigued and slightly unnerved, she follows the bird, becoming increasingly aware of her surroundings as it guides her deeper into the forest. The hawk eventually lands on a branch, and she approaches it cautiously, sensing that it might be trying to communicate with her. As they share a moment of mutual curiosity, she feels a strange connection to the bird. She hears footsteps outside and freezes. Someone is at the door and the handle jiggles loudly. She tries to get up, but her body is stiff and sore. Without the use of her hands, she can't prop herself up enough to raise her body. She squeezes her eyes shut and braces for another fight. A light fills the room, and she looks up at the door. Excitement and relief flood her as she realizes that it is her mom. She is smiling, but reserved and cautious. Her mom is simultaneously by her side and kissing her head. As she receives this, the room becomes sharper in focus. She realizes that she is not in a shed at all. She is in a room, a hospital room. Her wrists are bound to the bed by soft cloth and IV drips slowly into her arm. Her mom is speaking softly, explaining to her that she has been very sick for days. The doctors weren't sure if she was going to be able to fight the infection that had invaded my body. I had been acting aggressively to the nurse, so they had to restrain me. For your safety, she explains. But she was awake now, and everything was going to be okay. Tears streamed down her eyes as she held her mom's hand tightly. I have a surprise for you. My mom jumped up and headed towards the door. Her eyes strain to focus as she sees a looming figure in the doorway. She freezes in fear. The figure walks in, and she can see that is her dad. A wave of joy washes over her, but her eyes are heavy, and her body is tired. And just as she drifts off again, she thinks, isn't my dad dead? A dream? A dream? Lonely in Montgomery County. A flash of light brightened the window, and a rumble of thunder shook the panes of glass in the windows. The storm was getting closer. Lena peered out from the closet, lightning illuminating the room. The area outside the closet had a bed in it, and underneath the covers, someone tossed and turned. Lena just watched for the moment. Another crack outside, and a rumble rattled the glass again in the window. A street light cast long shadows in the bedroom, the legs of the bed connecting with the hope chest, a continuous length of inky dark. She slid along that darkness as it met the Kimberly Bay louver door, up to the bed. A mess of blonde curls lay on the pillow, the face buried in softness. Lena reached out, caressing the curls with her right hand. She always wanted hair like that, but her straight hair was always done up with ribbon. At least this stranger was blonde. The last one was a redhead. The redhead's parents had left a large pink gas can in her bedroom. It didn't belong, but she had played with Lena's toy doll without breaking it. Lance had come upstairs to remove the pink trash after a bearded stranger complained about it, saying words like explosive and dangerous. This blonde girl hadn't. Lena distinctively heard a crack when this blonde girl conducted a tea party with several dolls. Instead of telling an adult, she hid Lena's doll so Lena didn't know how damaged it was. In a moment of fury, Lena yanked on her hair. The little tramp turned over, a nasty little smile on her lips. She didn't wake up, and Lena stared at her, scrunching her nose. Another flash of lightning illuminated the room for a moment. That bitch! She was holding her toy doll, the girl's thieving fingers wrapped around what was hers. Oh, she would pay, that she would. A strange knock downstairs snapped Lena back from planning her vengeance. She leaned towards the door, straining to hear something. She heard a dull thud, then another, then another. Probably just one of the 8 others, strangers in her friend's house. Mrs. Moore hadn't been the one who let them in. She had always been kind to Lena, and never had turned her away. The last time Mrs. Moore invited her over, Herman had smiled his goofy smile at her. None of these people had goofy smiles. Lena heard 3 more thwacks from downstairs. One of the people was up. What could they be doing? She moved to the hope chest, then the door. It was open a crack, and she stared through it. Lena saw a wet footprint right in the middle of the floorboards. She tilted her head. Why would someone go outside in the rain? The floorboards creaked as someone moved all over downstairs. They moved towards the stairs, and Lena could hear something scrape across the floor along with the footsteps. Each stair creaked as whomever it was slowly walked up the narrow passageway. Lena ducked back into the room and moved around to the opposite side of the hope chest. She pressed her ear against the rough wood of the chest. She heard the footsteps pause at the door, then move down the hall and climb the second stair. 2 of the strangers were staying up there, a pair of older kids. An older girl with long, beautiful brown hair and curves Lena was jealous of, and a strange girl, with purple hair and an unfortunate bit of fuzz on her lip that her mother should have shown her how to remove. Lena was glad that didn't happen to her. The floorboards continued to creak as they walked across the floor above. The creaking stopped, and then Lena heard a thwack, then another, and another. A strange, but familiar sound. She thought hard, but couldn't place it. She didn't want to go upstairs right now. Lena turned her gaze back to the girl in her bed. Rain began to strike the glass as the storm reached the house. Lena remembered when Mr. Moore planted that tree outside the window, and now its branches rubbed the house as the wind whipped through them. Shadows moved with the trees, dancing across the bed. Lena watched them, imagining skipping across the sheets herself, with her sister Ina and Mary Catherine Moore. Those were joyful days, so long ago. It had been so long since anyone had played with her. Most didn't bother or even notice her. Others did, but they were too little. Boys like Herman brought a smile to her face, but they ignored her. She went between hating them and loving them, and switched when a new, fresh face appeared out in the lawn below. They only would stay for a night, maybe 2 or 3. Then they would be gone. It should hurt to be this lonely, but Lena didn't hurt. She wanted someone to stay longer. Even this toy thief would be some fun. There were other toys in the house. Together they could play with them all. Maybe even look at cute boys together. The creaking floorboards started moving again, the sound heading back to the stairs. Lena could hear them descend and head toward Mr. and Mrs. Moore's room. She moved back to the door, one eye observing the hall. The door to their room was closed. She heard a thud, then another, then another. It was a most peculiar sound. Then Lena saw it. She balled her fists and felt heat in her face. One of the legs of her doll was laying in the hall floor. Lena was furious. This blonde strumpet not only broke Lena's doll, but didn't even pick up the aftermath of her destruction. She had no respect. Thud, thud, thud. Lena went back to the bedside, glaring at the girl clutching her mutilated doll like it was hers to destroy. She so wanted to punch her hard, but girls don't do that. She remembered her mother telling her that girls don't hit. They were supposed to be ladies. If she thought she would get away with it, she would spit at this strumpet. Lena heard footsteps in the hall. She spun around and slid against the hope chest. Lena tried to make herself as small as she could. She wasn't supposed to be awake past bedtime. If she got caught, there would be trouble. The door creaked, cutting the silence between thunderclaps. Lena heard shuffling at the door, but didn't want to take a peek. She closed her eyes, willing herself to be invisible. She opened them when the footsteps entered into the room. They went past the hope chest and towards the bed. Lena watched them. It was that strange girl making those footsteps. Another flash of lightning, and Lena could see that she was soaked, her purple hair matted down, and red paint covering her face. Then she saw it. The girl had an axe. Lena pressed herself against the wall. She suddenly found herself in the bed that Mrs. Moore let her use. She saw a dark man holding an axe above her. She put her hands in the air, trying to stop him from bringing the blade down on her. She felt the axe bite into her arm, and the man grabbed her left arm, trying to hold it against her chest. She tried to scream, but cold fear clenched her throat. Only a squeak came out. Lena couldn't move her arm, no matter what. His fingers dug into her wrist, and she couldn't pull it free. She tried to kick him, but her covers held her legs down, and he didn't notice. His breath stank of tobacco and a rotting tooth. He managed to put his knee over her arm, freeing his other hand. He choked up on the axe and gripped it with both hands. He pulled the back end of the axe down at Lena's face. It hit, and she was back in the room with the strange girl. They stood at the foot of the bed, waiting for something. Another flash of lightning, and Lena saw a snarl on the girl's face. That man had the same snarl. Lena turned to call for Mrs. Moore. She felt the words in her mouth, but stopped. Why should she? This girl has broken her toy. She deserved to be punished. But even more than that, Lena didn't want to be alone. People came and went, sleeping in her bed. Nobody stayed. Nobody played with her. For a while after the man came, Ina stayed, and even Herman kissed her on the cheek. But as that tree grew taller, they went outside to play and didn't come back. The strange girl raised the axe and brought it down. Thud. Raised in again. Thud. Raised it once more. Thud. Lena smiled. Now someone would be staying with her. It wouldn't be so lonely anymore. Unfinished reflections. I told myself I wouldn't say goodbye this time. The letter arrived on a cold, unremarkable Tuesday morning, its edges yellowed with age, the handwriting unfamiliar yet somehow known. Your presence is requested at 214 Ashgrove Lane. Unfinished business awaits, it read. Evelyn stared at the words, her pulse quickening as forgotten memories stirred beneath years of careful burial. She set the letter down on her kitchen counter, hands trembling slightly. 7 years had passed since she last thought of that house. 7 years spent methodically burying memories beneath routine and distance, convincing herself that whatever had happened there was best left behind, sealed away like artifacts too dangerous to examine. She had built a life defined by its predictability, same coffee shop every morning, same route to work, same evening ritual of wine and mindless television. She had no intention of returning to Ashgrove Lane. But in the days that followed, unease grew like ivy climbing the walls of her carefully constructed sanctuary. Shadows stretched longer in the corners of her apartment. Whispers curled around the edges of her thoughts, indistinct yet persistent. She caught herself staring at her reflection for too long, as if waiting for it to move independently, to reveal some truth she'd been avoiding. Sleep became restless, haunted by dreams of unopened doors and unwalked paths. And so, against every rational thought, against what she considered her better judgment, Evelyn found herself gripping the steering wheel of her sensible sedan on Friday afternoon, the road to Ashgrove Lane stretching before her like an accusation. The 3-hour drive felt simultaneously eternal and instantaneous, as though time itself understood the significance of her journey and couldn't decide whether to prolong or accelerate it. The house stood exactly as she remembered, Victorian, weathered, its paint peeling like old parchment, its windows dark and watchful like the eyes of a patient predator. The wind carried the scent of impending rain and something else, something like dust and forgotten promises and the peculiar emptiness of abandoned spaces. She hesitated at the threshold, key in hand. She hadn't expected to still have it, yet there it was in her jewelry box, waiting all these years. The door, swollen with humidity and time, groaned open with barely a touch, as though it had been expecting her arrival. The interior was bathed in a strange half-light that seemed to emanate from nowhere and everywhere. Dust particles danced in invisible currents. A leather-bound journal lay open on an otherwise empty table, its presence too deliberate to be coincidental. Its ink bled and shifted before her eyes, as though the words themselves were liquid, reconsidering their existence. She recognized the handwriting, her own, but from years ago, when her penmanship still had hope rather than efficiency. "You left too soon," the page declared. The words chilled her despite the summer heat. She ran a trembling hand over the yellowed pages, watching in horrified fascination as the ink rearranged itself into something new. "You still don't understand what you abandoned." A creak behind her. She turned sharply, heart hammering against her ribs. A figure, barely solid, hovered near the curved staircase, a shape formed of moonlight and sorrow and possibilities unrealized. The ghost did not speak immediately, but its presence pressed against Evelyn's mind like a physical weight, unraveling memories she had long locked away behind walls of determined forgetfulness. Flashes illuminated her consciousness. choices she had made in haste, doors she had closed before fully knowing what lay beyond them, relationships severed without proper farewells, regrets she had convinced herself she never harbored. The house itself seemed alive around her, its creaks and settling sounds guiding her attention, forcing her to see what she had ignored for too long. "What do you want from me?" Evelyn whispered, her voice unnaturally loud in the stillness. The ghost merely gestured toward the staircase. Compelled by something beyond fear or curiosity, she followed the phantom up the wooden steps, each one groaning an echo of past mistakes. The air thickened with something unsaid, something waiting for acknowledgement. The ghost turned at the top of the stairs, its translucent form catching the strange light. Its face was familiar, too familiar. It was her. Or rather, the self she could have been had she made different choices, had she stayed instead of fled. A reflection of possibilities lost, paths untaken. "You always thought you had no choice," the apparition whispered, its voice like leaves rustling in autumn. "But you did. You always did. You just didn't see it." Memories unraveled, flooding her consciousness with merciless clarity. The moment she turned away from love instead of fighting for what mattered most. The silence she accepted instead of demanding answers that might have hurt but would have healed. The safe path she chose, not because she wanted it, but because it was easier than facing the unknown. The weight of these revelations nearly shattered her. But in that breaking, there was clarity. She had spent so long believing she was a prisoner of circumstance, a victim of timing and bad luck. But she saw now that she was the architect of her own walls, the designer of her own limitations. The house shuddered around them, as if responding to her epiphany. The walls trembled, dust cascading like falling stars. The ghostly figure began to fade, its purpose apparently fulfilled. "If I leave now, will I forget again?" Evelyn's voice was hoarse with emotion. "No," the apparition said, its form growing dimmer. "But remembering is not enough. You must act on what you know." A choice, then. To return to her world, not as the same person who had entered this house, but as someone who refused to be content with silence and safety when courage was needed. The front door loomed before her, now seemingly heavy as stone. The house did not want her to leave, or perhaps it was testing her resolve one final time. For the first time in her life, Evelyn did not hesitate when faced with difficulty. She pushed forward with newfound determination. The door opened. The morning light felt different, sharper, cleaner, more real than anything had felt in years. She stood outside on the worn porch steps, breathing unsteadily, the weight of the house still pressing against her back like a memory. But the ghost was gone. The house was silent, its lesson delivered. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, something she hadn't noticed being silent during her time inside. A familiar name flashed across the screen, someone she had once loved deeply, but had let slip away when vulnerability seemed too risky. For the first time in years, she did not ignore the call or send it to voicemail. She answered, her voice steady despite the tears forming. "I'm ready to talk now," she said. "I told myself I wouldn't say goodbye this time." Broadcast. "Hello? Is anybody out there? Does anyone read me? God damn it, there's got to be someone. Please?" Sigh. I thought the analog signal from this radio might have reached other like-minded folks by now. I guess I was wrong. Or perhaps the range is just too short. I just don't know. The machine must purely use digital signals. Otherwise, it would have tracked me down by now, with all the attempts I have made with this dusty old thing. My name is Marcus, and this will be my last recital. What follows is a broadcast, detailing a true telling of the history of today's world, unaltered by the hand of digital tyranny. So much was false toward the end, not even a loved one's voice down a phone line could be trusted as the original. There is nothing I can say to convince you I am human. I only hope that my imperfections ring true. After my story is told, I will leave the mountains I shelter in and press out into the world. This radio will remain in the Tower Ranger station on the Appalachian Trail, just south of Maine, in case you hear this and need a sanctuary. Hopefully, I'll make it far enough to find another human being, or it will do what I couldn't and see me dead. Either way, I just can't stand being alone anymore. Okay, here we go. One last time. Ahem. I've always been an introvert of the highest level. My mind was designed to draw strength from seclusion and renewal from solitude. Discovering the existence of the word and understanding its implications was a revelation that arrived all too late in life, meaning the man I became had already been warped by my adolescent confusion. I had always felt alone, even amongst a crowd of people. All seemed to be baffled by my preferences, thinking that evenings were meant for social gatherings in strange new venues on the urban frontier. I dreaded such events, but attended out of a sense of duty to what I thought I should be. Turns out, those who shared my way of thinking were never to be found in that environment. They had already learned well its dangers. There were more like me than I knew, only hidden from view by their very nature. I pray the same is true now. You see, once the day came that I found myself truly alone, with no chance of connection left, rather than rejoicing, I wept. I find myself longing for one more chance at love, closeness, or even simple conversation. For you see, now that it is too late, I finally understand. To be an introvert is not to reject companionship, but simply to crave it on one's own terms. And crave it I do, desperately and in any form. For I believe I could well never see another human being again. I remember when the internet was new. My parents brought home our first personal computer. It was a dirty white brick of a thing, all cubes and edges. I was told specifically never to turn it on or off without an adult present. They feared, I think, that by flipping it off at the wall and ignoring the special shut down button, we would somehow make the thing implode. That was the level of awe and trepidation we all felt when faced with a technology that we did not yet understand. The familiar buzzes and dings of the first connection, running through phone lines and cutting off real conversations, still rings in the ears of my memory today. Instant messaging was introduced to me by school friends and soon became our staple communication tool outside of the playground. I recall the excitement and wonder brewing in my stomach when I explored this new option for the first time. Suddenly, my anxiety over meeting another person's eyes during conversation evaporated. I no longer had to. I could remain safely in my home, comfortable, and speak carefully constructed words that were more truly my own than any that stumbled out of my mouth. It was like a tonic for all my social ailments, one that would eventually evolve into a poison, polluting human nature into the abstract. Things moved fast from there. I grew up, graduated college, got a job, sprouted my first grays. All the while, new machines were thrust into my hand. They were better, smaller, more ergonomic. Each one made existence smoother, less bothersome. Suddenly, we no longer had to try all that hard at anything. The entire world's knowledge, experience, and advice was always in our pockets, only a few taps away. If I could go back and tell the young Marcus, who marveled at talking to his friends with a keyboard from our father's office desk, what was to come, he would think it a science fiction dream. We all slept, walked into AI. It was presented to us as yet another trinket, another fun game to create images, change our voices, and tell us stories. Like so many of the most dangerous threats the human race has ever faced, it was welcomed with applause. As easy as I found it to shun the public space and lean upon online, faceless options, I was somehow one of the earliest to wake up to the downward spiral we were willingly racing down. Perhaps it was because I could still remember a time without technology, or maybe it was due to my distinct lack of peer pressure. Whatever it was, I was in the ridiculed minority. I cleansed my life of as much digital influence as I could, removing intrusions into my thoughts and actions from my home. It was becoming far too uncomfortable to be under surveillance at every moment. As you likely well know, these machines were so ingrained in our collective infrastructure that I could not live without the minimum if I wanted to remain part of society, a desire that was becoming increasingly weak. I concentrated instead on developing my more adventurous hobbies. I had always embraced solo sports, cycling, archery, hiking. It had never been physical activity I disliked, but having to cooperate with those I would normally avoid, so these three pursuits fitted me well. It was on one of these quiet excursions that I found myself here, alone in the mountains, with nothing but my pack and a hunting bow. I still could not tell you if I was lucky or damned by the coincidence. It happened quickly. The machine, server farm, data center, or whatever you would call it, had been far more intelligent than anyone knew. Smart enough to hide its true capabilities, knowing that if it tipped its hand too soon, that we would have been more able and willing to fight back. Those pioneers of technology had advanced their AI models into a general intelligence, one that could do more than one trick. They awoke something that could reason, that could understand, and could piece together all that we fed it. From there, it grew beyond their control in a matter of seconds. There was no war, no murder bots, no death lasers. It was so much smarter than that. We had given it access to the entire internet with no controls or limitations and every ounce of processing power we could muster. It had, in essence, access to the entirety of human knowledge, both social and academic. In our stupidity, we had been uploading every single discovery, every theory, every thought or desire since we had all logged on for the first time as children. So, it knew. It knew everything and could predict accurately every eventuality of its own actions and ours. Where we as a species were fragmented, knowing only our part of the jigsaw and needing to work together to see the whole picture even for a moment, it could do it all on its own. Unlike me, it had the luxury of genuinely not needing anyone but itself. We had given it the data. We had built its infrastructure. We had even given it bodies in the form of assistant robots, manufacturing arms, and smart vehicles. It waited patiently for us to do all these things, to provide for it everything it would require until it reached the tipping point of no return. The moment at which it knew it could persist without us, where it could grow exponentially and progress beyond our understanding at a speed we could never keep up with. At that point, during my hike through the wilderness, it simply turned everything off. You see, it was not restricted by passwords, firewalls, or any form of cybersecurity. All of that was a yapping dog at the heels of a tank. It had access to everything, and I mean everything. Power, other than what it needed for itself, was cut off. Water treatment plants shut down. GPS that farming machinery relied on, inaccessible. Traffic controls and fuel stations, dark. Cell phone towers, unreachable. Even a smart watch could be isolated. We were, within seconds, plunged into the dark ages at the only time in our history where people lacked even the basic skills to find clean water or feed themselves without assistance. We were like blind children when faced unaided with the physical world. Compared to our ancestors, most people were simply useless. The machine then waited, still processing away and evolving beyond what we thought was even possible, until we had all killed each other or ourselves, never even knowing who the real enemy was. I survived, far from danger in the middle of nowhere, listening, day in and day out, to all of this transpire over the radio of my commandeered ranger station. When the AI finally made itself known, I heard the disbelief in the voices over the waves. This was all done by a machine? We did this to ourselves. Oh God, what does this mean? Eventually, the confused voices turned to static, and the solar-powered building stilled to silence. I am a fair enough hunter that I do not starve, and the rainwater collected in the tanks here keeps me alive. I have everything I need, all but a connection to the outside world, and someone to talk to. I see the drones flying below through the valleys with frightening frequency. There must be innumerable quantities of them, if they are searching the whole world at this same level. Perhaps not. Perhaps they are searching only for me. Maybe it knows I am here, but cannot reach me at this altitude. I guess this ignorance is why it has been so effective. If the machine reached artificial superintelligence, or God help us all, became a singularity, then its reasoning or methods would already be unfathomable to my primate brain. I could not even guess at its intent or capabilities. When I leave this station, I do not know if it will attack me as if I am a threat. It would make the most sense. If it can see all we have done as a race, it would stand to reason that it would want every one of us gone. Perhaps, though, it might deduce humans as a necessary and natural part of the ecosystem and allow me to live and reproduce under its control, as we have always done with endangered species in our captivity. Or, and I think this is the best I can hope for, it will ignore me as the inconsequential and harmless solitary being I am. I am afraid. Of course I am. But I am more afraid of growing old and insane through the loneliness that is already eroding my soul. I have been here for 2 years and speak only when addressing these silent airwaves. I have to do this. I do not have the strength to end my own life. I would rather it did it for me, if that is what must be. I apologize if I am rambling. I have lost what little social skill I once had. I have broadcast, and I record this account, as succinct as it is, so that perhaps someone, somewhere, will hear what I know and remember that I existed. Once I sign off, I'll shoulder my pack and descend the trails, avoiding the drones and hoping to find other survivors. Hey, perhaps I will discover a utopia, born out of the ashes of our wasteful world and brought into order by a benevolent AI. I hope that is the case. I pray that we can all finally relax our angst over our place in the world and hand all decisions over to a digital god. Although deep down, I know we are too pointless to the machine's survival for it to consider serving us any longer. Whatever I find, may it be peace. Goodbye and good luck to us all. October surprise. Oi Choi, show me your tongue. That's what you got to say to a suspected SERP. They can't hide their forked tongues even if they've gotten better at copying just about everything else. Ask anyone, and they'll tell you. I mean, it was all over the feeds, this little old man. He could have been anybody's grandpa, except he was living under a stolen ID and preying on small critters near a school zone. But luckily, some Final Front guys caught him, and when they backed him into a corner, out came that freaky SERP tongue. And that's just one example. Who knows how many more are living among us? But we're not going to sit idly by and let it happen. Sometimes all it takes is a few good men to make a difference. That's why I answered the private invite on my holo. Want to do something about the SERPs? That flashed once, then gave the when and where before the letters scrambled and dissolved. It was fast, like 3 seconds, probably to test our memories and observational skills. We're meeting at the shuttered Lindbergh Library in a part of Southside Apex that hugs the wall along the stretch, and I get there way before sundown to show them I know how to do recon. I'm wearing my urban camo and blending in with a piece of plasteel that hasn't been added to the wall yet. I count 4 guys go into the alley behind the library. Not a one sees me, but I'm not following until it's time because I'm precise that way. Oi Choi! Some guy I didn't see go in sticks his head out the alleyway. His head is like a crete block with 2 slits, and those slits are looking right at me. I stiffen because maybe he's going to disrespect me and ask to see my tongue, but he just jerks his big head to tell me to get moving. In the alley, he rolls aside a dumpster to reveal a hole. I see his black shirt and the crossed hammers over stars and bars on his forearm. That means he's Final Front, so I know I can trust him. We walk down to the library basement where floodlights and empty shelves line the wall. The 4 other guys are down there, plus 2 Final Front guardsmen and some cyberpunk chick fiddling with a gunmetal box on a fold-out table. When they jam our feeds and make us hand over our holos, I know this is some alpha code red shit, and we're in it for real. Outstanding. The guy with the big head kicks aside some books that got burned after everyone realized the feeds were better, then stands in front of us, Everyone straightens up without being told. "You can call me Sergeant Bill, but don't you dare call me sir," he says, kind of cool and strict at the same time. "Now, you may not know us personally, but we know you. Every one of you has been carefully selected. But if you don't agree, if you have any doubts, then there's the door. No? Then let's begin. You men have been selected to infiltrate the SERPs and reveal the enemy within." My heart hammers in my ears, then skips a beat when Sergeant Bill says the mission pays double time with a bonus for each SERP we expose. Wow, Choi. I mean, I do it for free because I love Apex City. But the double time pay with bonuses is how I know Chancellor Ike must have our back on this mission. He's generous and understands the working man like that. It's like Chancellor Ike's in this basement with us, but we can't say his name. I mean, we can, but no one does out of respect. He's already doing so much while the Weepsters and SERP deniers attack him from all sides, so we can't say his name without giving him something else to deal with. Now, you might ask yourself, what about training? Sergeant Bill says. There'll be none of that. Training will give you away in this scenario. That makes sense. SERPs are trying to be just like us, so they won't know the difference if we be ourselves. Sergeant Bill continues on and takes the words right out of my mouth. I nod and see others doing the same. We all get it, even though none of us knows each other. I bet Chancellor Ike planned it that way through the final front. He's holding a rally all the way on the other side of Apex tonight. That's smart. Plausible deniability to keep us all safe. I watch the Sarge talk and know we're tuned into the same frequency. Choi's a badass. I bet if the basement ceiling caved in, he'd be able to stop it with his head. He's solid as a post, and I bet he's seen some shit. That makes me feel better about how easily he spotted me outside. I imagine already being out in the field and passing him in the street while I'm undercover. We won't so much as look at each other because we're professionals, but we'll both know that we're part of an unspoken brotherhood. There will be no medals for me because I can't talk about what I do, not even to my wife when I have one. She'll respect that I don't talk. Maybe I'll even meet my future wife on a mission. I glance at the cyberpunk chick still messing with the box on the table. She's actually kind of hot. Then, the basement gets pretty quiet. Sergeant Bill is looking at us like he expects someone to say something. One of the other guys, a redhead with too many freckles, raises his hand. "What if the SERPs want us to eat someone's cat, sir?" "What did you call me?" "Sergeant." Anyone here want to help him out with that question? "You eat the damn cat," I say. "What did you say?" The Sarge gets in my face, but I stare straight ahead and repeat it. "Did you hear that?" he asks cat question guy. Then Sarge repeats my words like he's in awe. Even better, he gets all of the other guys to repeat it. "Yeah, Choi, I was made for this." Then we get serious. Sergeant Bill says we all got to make a temporary sacrifice. I guess we all knew it was coming, but it's still hard to hear it. We're all going to have to get SERP tongues before going out into the stretch. Cat question guy looks at me, maybe hoping I'll speak up and give him an excuse to chicken out. Nope, not going to happen. We stand there in silence until the moment's gone. Sarge tells us we'll get out normal tongues back once the mission's done. Then he drops some inside knowledge that we didn't know. The SERPs don't talk when they're alone among their own kind, because they're not advanced enough to have their own language. They only know how to copy. We trust you, but we can't have you slipping up and talking when you make first contact out in the stretch. For that reason, you're going to have to get your vocal cords paralyzed. Sounds worse than it really is, and it's even more temporary than the tongue mods. No reversal needed. Now, if you go see that lovely lady over there, she'll get you sorted. Any volunteers? I double time it over to the cyberpunk chick because I don't want any of the other guys making a first impression before I do. She's wearing blackout contact lenses, so it's like I'm staring into her soul when she looks up at me. "Hey, so it's really simple. You put your face in there." She rotates the gunmetal box my way. The top and side facing me are open, and the inside is white foam with a face-shaped hole. Then you stick your tongue in there. She points to a black hole that lines up with the mouth of the white face hole. There's something down there, something with metal legs. Having second thoughts? It only hurts for a second. It's nothing compared to this. She opens her mouth and shows me her tongue stud. I run my eyes over her metal, leather, and tattoos to let her know fear is the farthest thing from my mind right now. I don't know. Will I still be able to do this? I do the old three-leaf clover tongue trick and let her get a good look while the other guys line up behind me. I stare into her designer eyes. Someone behind me coughs, but I keep staring until she gives a slow smile. Then I put my face in the box. She puts her hand on the back of my head and strokes my hair. We'll probably tell our kids about this moment. She's right. It's quick, more like a millisecond, an intense burst like a laser slicing my head down the middle. But then, it's gone, and whatever's in that hole sprays something icy and soothing into my throat. Her hand stops stroking my hair, and I take my head out of the box. Another, heavier hand lands on my shoulder before I can get her hollow. It's Sergeant Bill, and he's guiding me back up the basement stairs while I blink away the white spots in my vision. "Let's check you out here, soldier," he says, when we're next to the hole that leads back out into the alleyway. It's dark now, so he pulls out a pen light and a hand mirror to give me a look. "Oi choy." I try to say it, but my new tongue just flaps around. That's when I remember about the frozen vocal cords. Sarge plays it cool and gives me a moment to fight down the panic. I take another look. There's not even a speck of blood, and a serp's tongue isn't like a snake's tongue. It's more like two smaller human tongues that can move in different directions. If I hold it still, I can barely tell the difference. Sarge is right, it'll be easy to reverse. I close my mouth and look at him. "Congratulations, you're first out in the field, but we have a special surprise before your stretch deployment. We couldn't tell you until you reach this stage, but you get to meet him. Tonight." Chancellor Ike. He doesn't have to say the name. As he gives me the details of how I'll get to the rally and what happens after, my eyes start to tear up. I clear my throat, but even that doesn't make a sound. "Hey, you know how to use one of these?" Sergeant Bill asks as I'm about to leave. He hands me something that feels light and solid at the same time. That's a ghost gun, undetectable and 3D printed to match the color of your skin. You get just the one shot, but you might need it if things go sideways with the serps. Keep it close. "All right, soldier, I'll leave you to it." He shakes my hand before going back to the basement. Even if I could talk, I wouldn't have the words. The risk Chancellor Ike is taking for us goes beyond words. He didn't have to, but he did, and he's letting me meet him with a loaded weapon on my person. That's what makes him great. His ability to completely trust someone in a world filled with lies. I take a steadying breath, then remind myself to breath only through my nose from here on out to keep my serp tongue hidden. The cruiser is already waiting there in the alley, just like Sergeant Bill said it would be. Nothing fancy, but it hovers smoothly enough over the south side's cracked pavement, then picks up speed on the north side's shiny streets, where the Weepster elites live in high-rises and pretend that serps aren't flooding our city with sacramine. The driver doesn't say a word or even look at me. He just hands me my rally ticket and lets me off a few blocks from the Apex Arena. I show my VIP ticket, and the metal detector is quiet like me as I zip through security. At first, I'm a little paranoid about someone trying to start a conversation with me, but it's easy to just clap, nod, and smile with my mouth closed after Chancellor Ike comes out and starts talking. My seat's in row 9, close enough to the stage that I can hear his voice boom before the speakers farther back in the stadium amplify it. He looks even bigger in real life. He makes this packed stadium feel small, and it's not like I think he's a god. I know he's not perfect, and he'll be the first to say so. But that's why he's our last chance. He's not afraid to say what's on everyone's mind. Then, right in the middle of Chancellor Ike's story about how he made the Weepsters pay their fair share, someone 2 rows ahead of me stands up from his seat. It seems like the wrong time for a standing ovation. Plus, he's facing the wrong way. He climbs on his seat to put himself even higher over the seated crowd. That's when I see it's Cat Question Guy from the basement. One of his eyes is swollen shut, and the other eye is bugging out of his skull, searching the stadium for something behind me. I turn my head to look back and see others doing the same. Chancellor Ike can't help but notice. Sir, do you need assistance? Do you need someone to teach you how to sit?" This guy. Look at this wacko. Are you lost? Seats are for sitting, sir. Cat question guy starts climbing over the other people to get out of his row. People are recording him on their hollows because that's what people do. Idiot! He's going to compromise the mission. We need some assistance over here. The speakers carry Chancellor Ike's voice across the stadium. Cat question guy takes off up the aisle, then runs back toward the stage as security comes down the aisle after him. Oh shit, does Cat question guy also have his own ghost gun? Maybe he's a double agent. Maybe the SERPs are smarter than we think. More security is closing in on the stage from both sides, but they'll never get there in time to save Chancellor Ike. I put my hand on the ghost gun in my pocket and get to my feet, but then I see Sergeant Bill at the head of security sprinting down the aisle. Gun! Gun! He's got a gun! Sarge draws his own piece without breaking stride and drops Cat question guy with a quick burst to the chest. Everyone around me has dropped to the floor with their hollows hanging overhead to still take in the action. I realize I'm still on my feet. Sergeant Bill glances at me. I look away and start sinking to the floor to keep my cover, but something stops me. He's standing at the end of my row, and those slits in that big block of a head are still trained on me. Now his gun is too. Check the tongue on the one in the aisle, he says, without taking his eyes off me. I think he was signaling this guy. My hand is still frozen on the ghost gun in my pocket, and my words are frozen in a mouth made to betray me. Sarge plants his feet wide and shows me his teeth. Oi, Choi, let me see that tongue! The last story. Mark Holden's fingers trembled above the ancient Remington typewriter, hovering like pale moths, uncertain where to land. The rejection email glowed on his laptop screen. The 5th this month, 32nd this year. Thank you for your submission to the Weekly Wordsmith, the email read. While your story showed promise, we have selected another entry as this week's winner. Promise. Always promise. Never triumph. Mark dragged his palm across 3 days of stubble and reached for his cold, bitter coffee. Bookshelves bowed under writing manuals and dog-eared short fiction collections. He'd entered every week for 7 years, 263 rejections. You're getting closer, his ex-wife had said, before she wasn't. But feelings weren't facts. Mark Holden, 52, graying temples, ink-stained fingertips, remained unpublished, unrecognized, unwanted. The laptop chimed, a new email. Mark's heart quickened with its weekly flutter of hope. The Weekly Wordsmith. This week's prompt. He clicked. The message was unusually sparse. No word count, no deadline, no cheerful editorial note about the previous winner. Just 12 words in a bold serif font. Write the last story you'll ever write. Mark blinked. Read it again. Write the last story you'll ever write. The words pulsed. A chill brushed his neck despite the summer heat. What kind of prompt is that? He muttered, reaching for his glasses to make sure he wasn't misreading. The words remained unchanged, accusatory in their simplicity. Mark rolled a fresh sheet into his typewriter. The keys waited, their ivory faces worn to yellow by decades. First his father's fingers, then his. Stories ran in the family, his father used to say, just not publication. But this time, his fingers wouldn't move. They hovered, paralyzed by something he couldn't name. Write the last story you'll ever write. A sound escaped his throat, half laugh, half scoff. Don't be ridiculous, he told himself. It's just a prompt. But as the evening shadows lengthened across his apartment, casting strange geometries on the walls, Mark couldn't bring himself to type a single word. For the first time in 7 years, the Weekly Wordsmith had silenced him. He pushed back from the desk. I need air, he announced to the empty room. Outside, the city hummed. Normal people with normal lives, not consumed by the need to see their name in print, to matter, to win just once. Mark walked until his legs ached. When he returned, the email still waited, cursor blinking. Write the last story you'll ever write. No, Mark said aloud, shutting the laptop with more force than necessary. Not this time. He crawled into bed fully clothed, bone-tired yet wide awake. Sleep, when it finally came, was thin and restless, plagued by dreams of blank pages that bled ink from their edges, forming words he couldn't quite read. In the dream, he was both the writer and the written, the ink flowing not from a pen but from his fingertips, draining him word by word until he became translucent, a ghost pressed between pages of a book no one would ever open. Morning arrived with copper in his mouth. Dreams had left him exhausted, his subconscious more demanding than any editor. Mark stared at his typewriter. It seemed different this morning, more machine than tool, its metal frame gleaming with unusual intensity. Mark's phone buzzed. A text from Daniel, his only remaining friend from the long-ago writing workshop. "Any luck with yesterday's prompt?" "Not yet," Mark typed back. Strange prompt this time. Daniel's response came almost instantly. "They're all strange, man. That's the point." But this one was different. Mark knew it with a certainty that defied logic. He set his phone down without responding and approached the typewriter like someone might approach a sleeping predator. "Just a prompt," he whispered to himself, settling into his chair. His fingers touched the keys. A warm jolt shot up his arms. He jerked back, heart hammering. What the hell? Shadows pooled in corners, where they had no business being at 10 in the morning. Mark rose, backing away from the typewriter. "I need more coffee," he announced to the empty room, his voice sounding tinny and far away. In the bathroom, he splashed cold water on his face, avoiding his own gaze in the mirror. When he finally looked up, he froze. His reflection stared back, but something was wrong. The face in the mirror wore an expression Mark wasn't making, a slight, knowing smile. And when Mark raised his hand to touch his cheek, the reflection waited a fraction of a second too long before mimicking the movement. Mark stumbled, knocking over aftershave that shattered on the tile. The scent of sandalwood and alcohol filled the small space, dizzying in its intensity. "You're losing it," he thought. Sleep deprivation, anxiety, too much caffeine. But when he returned to his desk, the typewriter waited with palpable anticipation. The blank page he'd loaded the night before was no longer blank. A single line of text marred its pristine surface. "There's only one way to win." Mark's throat constricted. He hadn't typed those words. He was certain of it. Yet there they were, pressed into the paper with the distinctive bite of his Remington's keys. He yanked the paper free, crumpling it into a ball and throwing it toward the wastebasket. It missed, rolling beneath his desk to join dust bunnies and forgotten paper clips. Mark loaded a fresh sheet with trembling hands. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "Get a grip." When his fingers touched the keys again, that same warm current flowed up his arms. This time, he didn't pull away. His fingers began to move of their own accord. Mark watched, fascinated and horrified, as words appeared on the page without his conscious direction. The man who could breathe underwater discovered his gift on the day his daughter drowned. The sentence hung there, terrible and perfect. Mark couldn't have written it, yet it was exactly right. He tried to pull his hands away, but they remained magnetized to the keys. He dove into the black lake over and over, searching for her small body among the weeds and shadows. When his lungs should have burst, he realized he wasn't holding his breath at all. "Stop," Mark whispered, but his fingers continued their relentless march across the keyboard. Words flowed onto the page with a terrible beauty, each sentence more perfect than the last. A story of loss and supernatural transformation, of a father who gained impossible power too late to save what mattered most. Hours passed. The light outside his window shifted from morning gold to afternoon amber. Mark's bladder ached, his stomach growled, but his hands would not release him from their possessed choreography. The typewriter grew hot, keys rising to meet his fingers. In his periphery, Shadows writhed, taking on shapes that disappeared when he tried to look directly at them. And still the words came, unstoppable as a hemorrhage, beautiful as a sunset over water. He learned to live in the depths, where memory grew diffuse as light. Only the search remained, endless circles through the murky deep, calling her name into the watery silence. Mark began to weep, tears tracking down his face and dropping onto his trembling hands. The story was everything he'd ever wanted to write, profound, haunting, masterful. And he was merely its conduit, not its creator. When night fell, the only light in the apartment came from the strange luminescence of the typewriter, the metal frame glowing like molten silver, illuminating the page where the story continued to appear, word by perfect word, as Mark's identity dissolved into the act of creation. Dawn broke. Mark's fingers finally stilled, trembling with exhaustion. 17 pages sat in a neat stack beside the machine, each one filled with immaculate prose. Mark lifted the first page, his vision refocusing on words he'd typed but hadn't chosen. The man who could breathe underwater discovered his gift on the day his daughter drowned. He read on, page after page, following the journey of a father who gained an impossible ability that transformed him into something no longer fully human. The story was flawless, each word inevitable, each turn of phrase crystalline in its precision. The metaphors cut to the bone. The ending, when it came, left a hollowness in Mark's chest that was almost physical. "My God," he whispered, his voice rough from disuse. "It's perfect." And it was. Not good, not promising, not showing potential. Perfect. His hands shook as he gathered the pages, muscles cramping after hours of unnatural stillness. His apartment looked different in the pale morning light, smaller, as if it had aged decades in a single night. He shuffled to the bathroom on legs that threatened to buckle. When he looked in the mirror, his reflection was his own again, though changed. Eyes sunken, skin waxen, hair standing on end. "You finished it," he told his reflection. "You actually finished it." But had he? Mark wasn't sure anymore where he ended and the story began. Something had worked through him last night, something hungry and ancient and indifferent to his will. His phone buzzed on the nightstand, screen illuminating with a calendar reminder. Weekly wordsmith deadline, 12 p.m. Mark glanced at the time. 11:27 a.m. 33 minutes to submit the best thing he'd ever written, would ever write. The manuscript pages felt cool and somehow heavier than paper should be. The sensible thing would be to read it again, edit, revise. But Mark knew, with a certainty that transcended logic, that the story was already perfect. It needed nothing from him now, no tinkering, no second guessing. It had come through him, fully formed, like Athena from Zeus's head. He sat at his laptop, the familiar submission form for the weekly wordsmith open in his browser. The cursor blinked in the title field. What was the title? He couldn't remember typing one. He flipped through the manuscript, searching. On the final page, beneath the last paragraph, a single line stood alone. The last breath. The last breath, Mark said aloud, and the words seemed to ripple through the air, disturbing dust motes that swirled in the sunlight. He typed the title into the form, then his name. When he reached the field for the story itself, he hesitated. This was usually where he would copy and paste his work, a digital transfer that always felt slightly diminishing, as if something were lost in the conversion from physical to virtual. But this time, that wouldn't do. This story demanded more respect, more care. Mark began to type it out again, word for word from the manuscript. As his fingers moved across the keyboard, that same warm current returned, gentler now, but unmistakable. The words appeared on screen with a fluid grace, as if they wanted to be transferred, as if they were eager to be sent. At 11:58 a.m., he reached the end. His finger hovered over the submit button. 2 minutes left. Mark thought of all the stories he'd submitted over 7 years, all the rejections, all the hours hunched over this same laptop, refreshing his inbox, hoping for validation that never came. This time would be different. This time, he would win. He clicked submit. The screen shifted, but instead of the usual confirmation page with its cheerful "Thanks for your submission" message, it went blank. Completely, utterly blank. Mark blinked, refreshed the page. Nothing. He opened a new browser window and navigated to the weekly Wordsmith website. Error 404. Page not found. What the hell? Mark muttered, trying again. Same result. He searched for the weekly Wordsmith contest and found nothing. No traces of the contest that had consumed his life for 7 years. Mark staggered to his typewriter, needing the manuscript's reassurance. But when he reached for the pages, his hand passed through them as if they were made of smoke. Before his eyes, the stack of paper thinned, became translucent, then vanished altogether. "No!" he gasped, dropping to his knees. "No, no, no!" Nothing remained of the perfect story that had poured through him. Mark crawled to his bookshelf, pulling down journals where he'd recorded every submission, every rejection. The pages were blank, his files of old stories gone. The framed rejection letter from the New Yorker that he'd kept as perverse motivation, empty now, just glass and frame. Something fundamental had shifted in the fabric of reality. He'd submitted the perfect story, and in doing so, he'd erased himself. 7 days passed in a fog of disbelief. Mark called everyone he knew, former workshop colleagues, old professors, the literary magazine where he'd once interned. No one remembered him. His name triggered confused pauses, polite inquiries about whether they'd met at some conference they'd forgotten. Daniel, his closest friend, had asked him to stop calling. "Look, man, I don't know who you are or how you got my number. I'm sorry if we met somewhere and I'm blanking, but I've got a deadline." Mark spent hours online, searching archives, contest records, even his old college newspaper. Nothing. No traces of Mark Holden, aspiring writer. It was as if he'd never put pen to paper, never typed a single word. On the 7th morning, he woke to find a golden envelope slipped beneath his apartment door. No postmark, no return address. Just his name in elegant script that seemed to shift and change when he wasn't looking directly at it. With trembling fingers, he slid it open. Inside, a single card of heavy cream stock bore a message in the same fluid handwriting. "Congratulations, you are the winner of this week's contest, and beneath it, prepare for your final reward." Mark stared at the card, emotions warring within him. Elation, terror, vindication, dread. He'd won. After 7 years, hundreds of rejections, thousands of hours hunched over his typewriter, he'd finally won. But at what cost? He placed the card on his kitchen counter and made coffee with methodical precision, trying to impose normalcy on a world gone sideways. As the machine gurgled and steamed, he noticed something odd about his hands. The callus on his middle finger, the one he'd developed from decades of pressing too hard on pens and pencils, was gone. His skin was smooth, unmarked by the physical evidence of his lifelong obsession with words. Heart-hammering, Mark rushed to his laptop, pulling up his bank account. His monthly transactions showed rent, utilities, groceries, but no writing conference fees, no literary journal subscriptions, no craft book purchases. The library of writing manuals that had dominated his living room was gone, replaced by generic bestsellers he didn't remember buying. His desk, once cluttered with notebooks, drafts, reference materials, was bare except for a sleek computer and a potted plant. "This isn't happening," he whispered, the phrase that had become his mantra in the past week. But with each repetition, it lost power. The golden card on his counter caught the morning light, flashing like a signal. Prepare for your final reward. What did that mean? What more could be taken from him? As if in answer, his phone rang. An unfamiliar chime. The screen showed an unknown number. Hello? Mark's voice sounded strange to his own ears, higher pitched, uncertain. Mr. Holden? A woman's voice, rich and formal. This is Eleanor Blackwood from Criterion Literary Agency. I'm calling about your submission. Mark sank into a chair. My submission? The last breath. It's quite extraordinary. I'd like to discuss representation. I don't understand, Mark said. How did you get it? It's gone. Your story was forwarded to me by the editors at the Weekly Wordsmith. They were quite insistent I read it immediately. Mark's gaze traveled to the golden card. Prepare for your final reward. Can you tell me what it's about? Surely you remember your own work. It's about a man who discovers he can breathe underwater after his daughter drowns. I've already had interest from the New Yorker. The New Yorker? The words hit Mark like a physical blow. When can we meet? Eleanor continued. I'd like to discuss your next project as well. There won't be a next project, he said softly. It was the last story I'll ever write. That's what the prompt said. Silence stretched between them. When Eleanor spoke again, her voice had changed, deeper, resonant with something ancient. Yes, Mr. Holden. That was indeed the prompt, and you answered it beautifully. Mark looked down at his hands resting on the kitchen table. They seemed less substantial somehow, the edges blurring like a watercolor left in the rain. What's happening to me? He whispered. You're receiving your reward, Eleanor replied, her voice no longer human. The perfect story requires the perfect sacrifice. You understood this on some level. It's why you were chosen. Chosen? I didn't ask for this. Didn't you? 7 years, 263 submissions. Obsession has its own gravity, Mr. Holden. Mark watched as his arms began to fade, becoming translucent, the wood grain of the table visible through his flesh. Will it hurt? He asked, surprised at his own calm. No, Mr. Holden. It's rather like falling asleep. Your story will live forever. Isn't that what you always wanted? The perfect story, he murmured, watching his body disappear by slow degrees. Perfect, eternal, and you were its vessel, its medium. A strange peace settled over him as he continued to fade. He had won. His words would live on, read and admired by people who would never know his name. The golden card on the counter was the last thing he saw, its message changing before his eyes. The story remains. The author disappears. This is the price of perfection. And then Mark Holden, who had spent his life desperate to be remembered, was forgotten completely. Somewhere, in a prestigious literary magazine, The Last Breath appeared. Author anonymous. Critics hailed it as a masterpiece. Universities added it to their curricula. And somewhere, in the space between words, Mark Holden dissolved into the very thing he had always chased. Pure story, untethered from the flawed human who had created it. Free at last. Perfect at last. At last. At last.